Hello and welcome to another stream of Frenchman learns about Japan's history. And yeah, we are still in the middle of the Sengoku Jidai. I mean, we still have probably a couple of streams. Today I'm hoping to do a lot more than last time, really get through a chunk of the story. Last time we had a lot of good stuff, the massive and legendary standoff between Uesugi Kenshin and Shingen Takeda. You know, the constant fighting, the outmaneuvering, and then the final battle where they faced each other, but there was no clear winner. And then I guess that was it. They never faced again, I believe. But yeah, that was going on. You also had the rise of Oda Nobunaga, the fall, who, you know, most of his territory was getting destroyed, but then he brought his army around and got a kind of crazy victory, crazily outnumbered. So yeah, that's where we stand in the Sengoku Jidai. I mean, we're still in the thick of it. You know, clans are rising in powers, some are falling, alliances are happening. A lot is going on, yeah, a lot is going on. And also, nice to see you. Actually, like, watching this has made me, like, really made me want to replay some more Mountain Blade Bannerlord Sokuo mod, which is based on the Sengoku Jidai. And yesterday I reinstalled it, and even before this I was playing it. Maybe I'll show you guys a little bit at the end of the stream where I'm at in my save. But yeah, we're gonna continue. As always, the videos are by the Shogunate. You'll find all the links to the playlist in the description. Thank you to them, obviously, for this amazing series. You can also find the link to my Discord, Streamlabs, Patreon, if you want to follow me, support me, request reaction. Your new hairstyle looks way cooler than before. I mean, it's not really new. I do cut my hair like every 1 or 2 months, I guess. Yeah. It's just that I'm kind of lazy. Like, I should do it 1 time a month, you know what I mean? But I tend to be lazy and I wait too long until it looks really bad. Yeah, it do be like that sometime. You know, I am lazy to cut my hair. But yeah, I don't think there's too much more to say. I'm ready for more of this. Let's see what happens. The Shogunate, episode 19, Sengoku Jidai, the reclamation of Mikawa. Let's get into it.
The Kawanaka.
Wait 1 second. Long hair. The last time I had long hair was 10 years ago. I had long hair until I was 18. My hairs used to be up to my neck, but at 18 years old I was tired of having long hair, so I just cut them, and since then I've never had long hair, yeah. So here we go.
Jima conflict as the war between Takeda Shingen and Uesugi Kenshin came to a close.
That was
after
really
the
cool.
massive and epic fourth battle of 1561, followed by the brief stare down of the fifth battle, which would occur 3 years later. Now, as the dust settles following the struggle at Kawanakajima and the extremely impactful battle of Okehazama, which occurred in 1560, we will turn to see the re-establishment of the Matsudaira clan, along with renewed hostilities between the Hojo and Satomi.
The Hojo are coming back. Well, I guess they're never really going. Alright, I like to learn. Shogunate. Sengoku Jidai. Reclamation of Mikawa.
The death of Imagawa Yoshimoto sent shockwaves across the east, where once stood one of the strongest and most stable samurai clans in the entire country, now had ruptured into a power vacuum. A void of military might, which once had been positioned between many powerful neighbors, influencing politics and directing the currents of the warring states. Yoshimoto's march on the capital had been a complete and utter disaster, not only ending his life, but also dooming his clan. In the wake of his death, the vast army he had taken with him had routed and returned home, back to the Imagawa provinces of Totomi and Suruga, leaving his unproven son, Imagawa Ujizane, in charge of what remained of the former Imagawa prestige.
He has a nice bowl. That's kind of an interesting portrait. Why is he holding a bowl? Okay. Nice bowl, dude.
To make matters worse, Matsudaira Motoyasu, the lord of the Matsudaira family of Mikawa province, who had been staunch vassals of the Imagawa, now appeared to be breaking away. For Motoyasu, who had been raised a hostage of the Imagawa, believed that now with Yoshimoto dead and the Imagawa devastatingly weakened, he could finally break free and declare Matsudaira independence once again. However, Motoyasu would be unable to truly separate himself from the Imagawa, while they still held many of his family as captives, most importantly his wife and son. Thus, he made a secret alliance with Oda Nobunaga, and for 2 years, he bided his time, waiting for the right opportunity, until finally, in 1562, he launched a surprise assault.
I guess, wait, what is the name of the territory of the Oda? I was gonna say like the Oda are just next to him. I don't think, it's not called Oda, it's Owari, I think. Yeah.
On the Imagawa castle of Kaminogo. It is here that Ieyasu relied upon ninja to effectively carry out a quick victory, as he needed to capture the castle and take hostages before word got to the Imagawa, who would surely have killed his family. The ninjas would be led by a man named Hattori Hanzo.
I mean, obviously I'm joking, I know that ninjas were real. Damn, Hattori Hanzo, I know him from Gintama, mostly. And you know, there's an arc in Gintama called the Shogun Assassination Arc. I mean, Gintama is like a soup of history and parodies, right? But yeah, Hattori Hanzo is really cool in Gintama. Yeah.
Who distinguished himself and would go on to serve Motoyasu loyally for years to come. The ninjas dressed as fellow Imagawa soldiers and used confusion to successfully slay and burn many of these soldiers garrisoned at Kaminogo, until finally the castle fell and Motoyasu would take members of the Udono family as hostages. This would allow him to exchange these captives for the safe return of his own family.
Nice.
The castle itself would be given over to the Oda as a show of good faith and a cementing of friendship between the two clans. Now fully free from the shackles of the Imagawa, Motoyasu would change his name to Ieyasu, dropping the Moto, which had linked himself.
Oh, it's same, okay. I keep like forgetting that people change their name all the time in the Sengoku Jidai, right? Yeah, okay. So that's Ieyasu.
To Yoshimoto. Yet, now that the Matsudaira clan was entirely independent, Ieyasu needed to turn his attention to domestic issues which plagued Mikawa. Most importantly, the Iko-Iki.
Monks.
Now, if you want to learn more about the Iko-Iki, I recommend checking out the 3rd episode in this series, if you have not already. But what is important to know here is that Mikawa, for years, had been a hotbed for the practice of the radical Jodo Shinshu, true Pure Land sect of Buddhism. A faith which sought to empower the common people and scorn the samurai overlords who rule the provinces of Japan. In fact, many samurai actually followed the Jodo Shinshu faith as well, especially in Mikawa. Yet, when Ieyasu made the Matsudaira clan independent once again, a moral dilemma arose for many of these samurai who followed the Jodo Shinshu faith, as now a truly admirable leader had come to power. Thus, many samurai now found themselves questioning where their true loyalties lie, with their chosen religion or with their rightful lord. Ieyasu understood the dilemma which had presented itself to many of these samurai. So, in 1563, Ieyasu began putting pressure on the Jodo Shinshu temples within the province.
I guess that's another way to do it, sure.
An act which caused many samurai to leave the faith and join the Matsudaira. Most notably, the head of the Honda family, Honda Tadakatsu, not to be confused with Honda Masanobu, who hailed from a minor branch of the Honda family and remained a strong Iko-Iki loyalist. The tension between the Matsudaira and the Iko-Iki came to a head in 1564, after a series of back-and-forth attacks on temples. Ieyasu decided it was time to concentrate his forces in aims to wipe out the Iko-Iki once and for all. This would lead to the Second Battle of Azukizaka, the first battle having occurred in 1548 between Oda and Imagawa forces. As fighting began between the Matsudaira and the Iko-Iki, Ieyasu's conduct and frontline leadership caused many of the Iko-Iki samurai.
Man, he looks so heavily armored. The horse is cool too. I mean, I'm guessing warrior monks are warriors, but they can't beat an actual army, I assume.
To see the courage he carried with him, this caused many of the Iko-Iki ranks to turn coat and side with the Matsudaira. As this continued to happen during the course of the battle, the Iko-Iki forces completely disintegrated, and thus Ieyasu achieved victory. Honda Masanobu wouldn't surrender until the very bitter end. Yet when he did, Ieyasu would pardon him, and eventually Masanobu would come to serve loyally under Ieyasu.
Okay.
In the aftermath of the Second Battle of Azukizaka, with the Iko-Iki threat severely diminished, Ieyasu was free to set about destroying the various Jodo Shinshu temples across Mikawa.
I mean, Nobunaga definitely, I think, is way more famous than Ieyasu and Hideyoshi, yeah? Like, when people think, I think obviously when people think of the great general of Japanese story, they think of Oda Nobunaga, yeah? But they don't really know the rest of the story with Ieyasu and Hideyoshi. I mean, I don't really know the rest of the story fully, so that's why I'm here to learn, yeah? I think Oda Nobunaga is the most famous, yeah? Yeah.
Essentially bringing an end to any Iko-Iki troubles in Mikawa, and further uniting and strengthening the province under his rule. Yet, as it just so happens, around the same time, another conflict was brewing just to the east. Renewed hostilities between the Hojo and Satomi. It had been 3 years since Uesugi Kenshin had marched south against the Hojo, capturing Matsuyama, Kamakura, and laying siege to Odawara. Since then, the Hojo had retaken all they had lost during Kenshin's march.
Well.
However, as Hojo Ujiyasu was now fixed on fighting against Uesugi aggression, their old enemies, the Satomi clan, would begin plotting a new plan of attack. For many years now, the two clans had been bitter rivals, especially after the first battle of Konodai in 1538, that saw Hojo victory and a severe weakening of the Satomi clan, which you can learn about in episode 9. But now, seeing that the Hojo forces were occupied elsewhere, Lord Satomi Yoshihiro decided to launch an assault on the Hojo-controlled Konodai castle. With only 8,000 men at his disposal, he succeeded in capturing it before Ujiyasu could respond. However, this turned all of the Hojo clan's attention on the Satomi.
Doesn't seem like the best idea. Nobunaga's descendant, Nobunali, is a famous figure skater. I think someone had told me that before, yeah. That's really interesting. That's really cool. I mean, yeah. 500-600 years later, that's really cool.
Immediately after the capture of Konodai, Ujiyasu mustered a force around 20,000 strong and marched out to deal with Yoshihiro. Yet this was all part of Yoshihiro's plan. In May of 1564, the two armies met at what would be remembered as the Second Battle of Konodai. With Yoshihiro vastly outnumbered, he led an even smaller portion of his army against the Hojo in an attack that would easily be halted and pushed back. But this was done in effort to lure the Hojo army deeper in.
It's a trap.
Yoshihiro hoped to then spring a trap on Ujiyasu and allow for the rest of his army to surround the Hojo. Unfortunately, this plan would never come to fruition, as Ujiyasu anticipated such action and sent...
Reverse Uno card. I'm going to surround you. No, I'm going to surround you. Wow. Well, yeah, I mean, very sad.
His son, Ujimasa, around to flank the Satomi rear. With Yoshihiro completely surrounded, the Satomi army broke and began to rout. The Hojo had won again, retaking Konodai and dealing such a devastating blow to the Satomi that they would never fully recover from this defeat. So, what can we learn?
Feels bad, but that's what happens. I guess this is kind of like very contrasting to, Takeda Shingen and Uesugi Kenshin, who are both very, very, very wary of each other, and so they both would never try such a simple encirclement, right? Because they know that the other one would be able to outmaneuver it. But in this case, yeah, the Satomi leader was thinking a bit too small. I mean, it's like the most basic military principle, just, yeah, come on. Okay, well, at least they tried. But rest in peace, the Satomi clan. Okay, that's it for this episode. Episode 20, the assassination of the Shogun.
In the last episode,
Maybe the best arc of Gintama. Let's see what happens.
Ever since this series began, we have witnessed the slow decline of the Ashikaga shogunate. And there to always exploit the weakness of the shogunate were the mighty lords of central Japan. From the days of Hosokawa control to now the rule of the Miyoshi clan, the Ashikaga were always heavily influenced by the strongest power in the Kinki region. And while some Ashikaga shoguns had been perfectly content simply being pawns to greater clans and protected behind the strength of others, the current shogun, Ashikaga Yoshiteru, was not. Of course, as we have seen, by the mid-1560s, Miyoshi Nagayoshi exerted the most power in central Japan. Thus, it was his clan that had come to dominate the politics of Kyoto. In recent years, under the steadfast leadership of Nagayoshi, the Miyoshi clan had prospered, extending their sphere of influence to the Tsutsui clan of Yamato province. Yet, everything changed when Nagayoshi died in 1564. With Nagayoshi's heir too young to rule the clan, a triumvirate of Miyoshi Nagayoshi's heir.
That's a funny looking baby. He looks like a monk baby.
Too young to rule the clan, a triumvirate of Miyoshi family members arose to be the boy's guardians until he came of age. Although, seeing this internal dilemma within the Miyoshi clan, Shogun Ashikaga Yoshiteru immediately began working towards severing his ties with the Miyoshi and re-establishing the Ashikaga and Kyoto as independent from outside influences. However, another prominent Miyoshi retainer also seized the opportunity to distance himself from the clan.
Looks like a good guy.
Matsunaga Hisahide. Hisahide was a schemer. For years, he had been plotting his rise to lordship, even perhaps going so far to have had a hand in the mysterious deaths of Nagayoshi's brothers and former heir. Yet Hisahide and the Miyoshi clan did agree on one matter, that of the position of Shogun Yoshiteru. Neither the Miyoshi clan or Hisahide wished for the shogun to re-emerge as independent from outside influence. Such renewed power would surely damage all future attempts by clans to have any sway over the capital. Thus, in June of 1565, samurai under the banners of Matsunaga and Miyoshi assaulted the palace of the shogun in Kyoto. What transpired would be a long, drawn-out, brutal struggle between the shogun's personal guard and the attackers. In the end, even Shogun Yoshiteru would join the fray, cutting down many attackers himself, before finally, with no other option, he chose to fall upon his own sword, killing himself.
I'm always confused. I mean, I understand that if you lose the battle, you do seppuku, right? But if you're in the middle of fighting, why not just die fighting rather than just be like, okay, sorry guys, I'm just gonna go kill myself. I don't know. Isn't it more honorable to just die in the middle of the battle? You haven't been captured yet, just die fighting? No? I don't know.
The shogun was dead, and with no heir to replace him. For the first time in roughly 230 years, there would be no shogun. No leader of the samurai class. The position was empty.
I mean, he wasn't doing much anyway during the Sengoku Jidai. Every clan is kind of fighting and doing their things, so the power of the shogun was really diminished anyway.
Kyoto remained open to the influences of the surrounding clans. Although the Ashikaga family was not wiped out, as there were still those who could rise up in attempts to claim the title of shogun. However, it would be some time before anyone chose to do so. Yet, while chaos had taken central Japan, to the west, the Mori and Amago once again found themselves locked in a bitter struggle.
Of course.
Tension had begun 4 years prior, in 1561, when Daimyo Amago Haruhisa had died, leaving the clan in the hands of his son, Amago Yoshihisa, and causing the clan's power and stability to rapidly decline. Seeing the weakening of the Amago at hand,
Mori Motonari is a great strategist.
time right to strike at their old nemesis. Thus, in 1564, the Mori clan began a new campaign to take the Amago power base of Gasantora, located in Izumo province. The Mori had previously attempted to take the citadel back in 1543, alongside the Ochi clan, yet they had failed at the hands of Haruhisa, an event which you can learn about back in episode 10.
I remember that.
Now, with an army numbering around 25,000, Motonari invaded Izumo and began laying siege to the citadel for the second time in his life. Yet, Gasantora was a mighty force to the citadel for the second time in his life.
So I guess they also had like little mortars like this, huh? Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, it's like a mortar. I assume, I mean, it's kind of small, so I don't think it shoots a cannonball, but I wonder what it shoots.
Yet Gasantora was a mighty fortress, and even with his strength in numbers, Motonari was still unable to successfully capture the Amago power base. This would not dishearten Motonari, however, as his determination was still fixed. He just needed a different strategy. Thus, he began efforts to completely cut off Gasantora from the surrounding Amago territory. This meant taking the fortifications around the citadel, and by late 1564, he had finally crushed the stubborn Amago resistance, and now had Gasantora completely isolated. Yet still, Yoshihisa refused to surrender. This led to yet another scheme that Motonari had worked out. As supplies began to dwindle within the walls, soldiers began to desert. Yet Motonari refused to let any deserters out. Any who fled from the citadel were turned away and sent back into Gasantora.
Make them fight inside.
The food supply within the walls continued to rapidly fall. So much so.
Man, this reminds me of, I don't think it was the Genpei War, I think it was during the Yosakunen Wars. There was something like that where like, someone was besieging a fortress, and the soldiers inside were like, sent out the women, children, and civilian, thinking that, the army outside would not kill them. But they started killing them with the point of like pushing them back inside so they keep eating more and starving the fortress faster. It's really messed up.
That when Motonari finally began letting deserters flee, so many did so that Yoshihisa had no other choice than to surrender in early 1566.
Wow.
With the surrender of the Amago daimyo,
the Mori are really good, huh?
The Amago clan completely collapsed, leaving the Mori to secure all remaining Amago territory.
Damn. Is the Mori the biggest clan now? That's pretty good, huh?
Western Honshu, the Chugoku region, was now firmly in the hands of the Mori clan. Motonari had supremacy in the west. Although it is important to note that the Amago family was not completely wiped out, and that many Amago family members actually went on to serve other clans. In fact, Amago Yoshihisa went on to become a monk in his exile, only to later become a retainer under the Mori clan.
Okay.
So, what can we learn?
Okay, interesting. I mean, in some way, there's part of this that's so brutal and like no mercy, but then very often they don't just massacre entire family once they've won. It's really interesting, like when there's mercy and when there is not. It feels kind of random at times, but it's interesting. Okay,
video.
Next
Now,
one.
as Oda Nobunaga.
The spoiler, please. Next one. The Nobunaga's conquest of Mino. I want more Nobunaga.
Oda Nobunaga had won at Okehazama in 1560 came as a complete shock, not only to all the clans in eastern Japan, but most likely to Nobunaga himself. Who could have ever guessed that such a small force would overcome such a massive adversary? For now, Nobunaga was considered a first-rate daimyo, and the Oda were becoming more well-known throughout the land. And if it was only luck that had won him his victory against the Imagawa at Okehazama in 1560, his luck would not end there, as 1 year later, in 1561, his old enemy, the daimyo Saito Yoshitatsu of neighboring Mino province, died, leaving the Saito clan in the hands of his teenage son, Saito Tatsuoki.
Does it look very teenage?
With Nobunaga's eastern border now secure, thanks to a new alliance between the Oda and the soon-to-be independent Matsudaira clan of Mikawa, he felt confident leading his army immediately into Mino province in the wake of Yoshitatsu's death.
Makes sense.
Reacting quickly to Nobunaga's invasion, Tatsuoki responded by setting out from his own power base at Tsunomata and meeting the Oda army in the open at Moribe. With Nobunaga's army twice the size of Tatsuoki's, he was able to quickly secure victory, routing Tatsuoki and the remaining Saito forces from the field. With this triumph, the unopposed Oda continued on to firmly secure Tsunomata from the Saito.
Easy peasy.
In the coming weeks, as Nobunaga attempted to secure the area around Tsunomata, Tatsuoki would strike out again, attacking a detachment of Oda soldiers. Nobunaga rushed out from Tsunomata to aid his forces, resulting in the short battle of Jushijo, where Nobunaga would once again crush the Saito. Having achieved a successful campaign, seizing Tsunomata and various Saito forts within Mino province, Nobunaga decided to return home to Owari. Of course, this was only the beginning, as he wished to truly capture the majority of the province in time. Over the course of the next several years, the Oda and Saito remained at war, and by 1563 we can see that Nobunaga decided to move his power base up to the recently constructed Komaki Castle to better manage his forces. However, it is here we can also see the legend of Toyotomi Hideyoshi begin to grow. Hideyoshi, who had formerly been an Ashigaru known as Tokichiro, had over time risen his reputation with his lord Nobunaga. Not only was Hideyoshi seen as cunning, but also strategically gifted. After the capture of Tsunomata, Hideyoshi had been placed in charge of repairs to the castle. Although Hideyoshi would take the initiative to aid the war effort, using an excess of supplies he had from the restoration of Tsunomata, Hideyoshi quickly built a fake castle near the warfront.
A fake
which
castle?
caught the Saito completely off guard by how rapidly it had
How do you build a fake castle? What does that mean?
been constructed, causing their morale to severely fall. As the war went on, the Oda eventually captured the new Saito stronghold of Inabayama in 1564, before Tatsuoki reclaimed it 1 year later in 1565. And although the war had devolved into a rough tug-of-war over the land, the Oda generally held the advantage. For the most part, things were...
Man, that's some big looking gun. They're not really like a normal musket, I guess. They have a big opening.
going smoothly for the Oda, until another confrontation arose with the Azai clan of Omi province. Daimyo Azai Nagamasa had also recently taken up hostilities against the Saito in aims to hopefully claim territory in Mino. However, Nobunaga desired full control over all of Mino, thus he needed to act quickly. He began negotiations with the Azai clan, and finally came to an agreement by offering the marriage of his sister Oichi to Nagamasa. Nagamasa would accept the proposal, and thus the Oda and Azai became linked through marriage.
Okay.
Of course, this also caused Nagamasa to back off so that Nobunaga could focus on securing Mino. Nobunaga's next major plan of action against the Saito lay in the realm of sly negotiations. With the Saito clan appearing increasingly weak, Nobunaga began discourse with many notable Saito clan retainers, managing to sway many of them over to his side, the winning side. In fact, it is also suspected that Hideyoshi had a large role to play in these negotiations as well. By 1567, Nobunaga felt confident enough to attack into Mino once again, this time in aims to secure the entire province and wipe out the Saito clan once and for all. His new campaign began as well as his last, as Oda forces swept through the territory, seizing Saito possessions. although the true goal was the recapture of the last Saito stronghold, Inabayama Castle. And once again, Hideyoshi would play a large role in the final battle for control of Mino province. Having now earned the trust of Nobunaga, Hideyoshi suggested a plan to quickly secure Inabayama from its stubborn defenders. He and a small group of soldiers would scale over Mount Inaba to attack the garrison from inside, causing chaos and opening the gates for the main Oda assault. Once the sneak attack was in full effect,
I'm really surprised that doesn't happen more often. I mean, I guess it's this thing with like the tradition of honor and all that, right? So most of the time they don't do, when they do a siege, they don't do like too much stuff like this, but it makes sense, yeah. Just try to get inside, try to open the gates.
his men would wave their water gourds atop their spears to signal the Oda army below, letting them know the time to strike was now. Nobunaga agreed, and the attack went off a perfect success. With the fall of Inabayama, the Saito were truly defeated. Mino was now in the hands of Nobunaga. And now, due to his exceptional skill, Hideyoshi was promoted to that of a full samurai and allowed to finally take a true family name. He chose the name Hashiba, a combination of the names of two other top Oda commanders, Niwa Nakahide and Shibata Katsuie. Thus, he would now be known as Hashiba Hideyoshi.
I don't think I had heard the Hashiba part before. You only hear about him as Hideyoshi. Yeah. Interesting. I mean, again, definitely someone I'm really into learning about because, yeah, again, I've always known the name Hideyoshi, but not what he's done. Just that it's important. So finally I'm learning about him. He has quite the rise. I mean, you know, it's hard not to root for the guy. He started at the bottom, right? Rose to the army, did some crazy good tactics and battles, and you know, was awarded like full samurai family. You know, meritocracy, that's really easy to be into, yeah.
So, what can...
And that's it, okay. Okay, well, I'm actually surprised it took this long for the conquest. You know, sometimes you have the impression of like someone like Nobunaga is so strong that's like a quick conquest, but no, this was a long, kind of drawn out conflict. It still worked out pretty great, you know, but definitely not, you know, as simple as you would think. Good stuff, good stuff. Good stuff.
68, Oda
The march on
Nobunaga
Kyoto.
must have felt invincible. In just a matter of 8 years, the Oda had become one of the strongest clans in the entire country, and certainly the strongest power in the central region. After having secured Mino province the previous year, his aspirations had grown substantially, and for good reason. After unifying Owari in 1558, fending off the Imagawa while also slaying Yoshimoto in 1560, and launching a successful takeover of Mino by 1567, it appeared that Nobunaga could do no wrong, as if fate almost favored him. That same year, he moved his capital to Inabayama, which he chose to rename Gifu.
Oh,
This
Gifu.
name was symbolic, as it was the same name as the castle from which King Wu Wang had set out to unify China during the 12th century. From this, you can kind of see where Nobunaga's mind was at. You see, being so close to Kyoto, and with his new Matsudaira allies guarding his
It doesn't look like Karakao for no reason.
rear, the capital was essentially within Nobunaga's grasp. He realized he needed to only reach out and take it. This would allow him to dominate the shogunate and Kyoto politics, as other clans had been doing before him. An ambition which would then likely be followed by a plan to seize the rest of the country, ending the wars and unifying the land under his sword. However, Nobunaga was cautious to march on Kyoto without proper justification, as he did not wish a coalition to form against him and suffer the same fate that Yoshimoto had met, crushed before he could even step 1 foot in the city. Not to mention, he most likely feared his own clan's stability would likely falter should he invade without just cause. Surrounding him were certainly loyal samurai, yet if the Sengoku Jidai proved anything, it's that
Everybody's ready to betray you at any second. Yeah.
One misstep could lead to a massive internal betrayal. Although, it was a very precarious time in the capital, to say the least. 3 years prior, the shogun had been assassinated, and in his place, the Miyoshi and Matsunaga had placed a puppet, the infant Ashikaga Yoshihide. Thus, Kyoto and the Ashikaga family were firmly in their grip. Although, there was one Ashikaga family member who still remained free of their influences. Ashikaga Yoshiaki. Yoshiaki had been a monk in Nara at the time of his brother's assassination. However, as soon as he learned of what had happened, he abandoned his religious life and sprung into action. Taking up with the loyal samurai Hosokawa Fujitaka, Yoshiaki began approaching various clans in search of finding a champion to aid him in taking the Ashikaga shogunate back from the Miyoshi. Yet, each clan he went to refused to grant him the assistance he needed. That is, until he came upon the Asakura clan of Echizen. By 1568, Yoshiaki was being sheltered by the Asakura, as Asakura Yoshikage had originally offered his support to Yoshiaki. Yet, after years of waiting, Yoshiaki was beginning to lose confidence in Yoshikage.
Fair enough.
However, it was then that another figure entered
Akechi Mitsuhide.
Akechi Mitsuhide. Formerly a samurai of Mino province, who had served the Saito at one time. He had since left Mino and found service under the Asakura. Knowing of Yoshiaki's plight, Mitsuhide approached him with the idea of a new champion for his cause, Oda Nobunaga. With the knowledge that Nobunaga was a rising star, Yoshiaki immediately took the advice of Mitsuhide and sent Hosokawa Fujitaka to Gifu to request aid from the Oda. This was exactly...
And that's a pretext. Yeah, you can say this is the right guy, the rightful guy, and march on Kyoto to put him in the throne.
Exactly the opportunity Nobunaga needed, as now he would have a legitimate reason to march on Kyoto. He eagerly accepted and took up Yoshiaki's cause, and soon his grand campaign began, just as Imagawa Yoshimoto had attempted before him. And as soon as Nobunaga had announced his plans to seize the capital and place Yoshiaki as the new shogun, the Rokaku clan announced their plans to oppose him. Although the Azai held most influence over Omi, the southern reaches of the province were held by the Rokaku clan. The Rokaku, like the Miyoshi, had dug themselves deep into Kyoto politics, and they weren't about to let the establishment of a new regime undo all they had worked towards since the end of the Onin War in 1477. However, their words meant little, as when Nobunaga's armies came marching, they easily swept the Rokaku forces aside. With the aid of Matsudaira Ieyasu, the Rokaku were firmly held off, and the Oda marched unopposed into the capital. What minuscule Miyoshi resistance there was quickly stamped out, making room for the arrival of the soon-to-be shogun, as Yoshiaki would eventually enter Kyoto, alongside his new ally, Mitsuhide. And before long, Yoshiaki...
Yeah, I mean, I guess the Emperor has no power at this point, so better that people don't remember him and mess with him. I will also try to not be remembered. Just leave me alone. Fight by yourself.
Officially declared the new shogun. Although it was yet to be seen who was really in control, Nobunaga had just successfully claimed the capital, and it was he who had led the charge. His soldiers who had done the fighting, and it was his might that would truly come to win out. Yoshiaki thought this victory was his. However, he would soon come to realize he was just meant to be yet another Ashikaga puppet. However, turning back to the east, we can see things were not looking so good for the Imagawa clan. While they had previously been one of the strongest and most stable clans in all of eastern Japan, now 8 years after the death of Imagawa Yoshimoto, they were suffering. Under the poor leadership of Imagawa Ujizane, the clan had soured many of their relations with neighboring clans, and had even lost their most powerful vassal, the Matsudaira clan. And now, to the dismay of Ujizane, the inevitable fall of the Imagawa was at hand. Hostilities between the Imagawa and Matsudaira had begun 6 years prior when Matsudaira Ieyasu seized the Imagawa Kaminogo Castle. From that point on, the two clans were in a state of conflict. By 1565, Ieyasu would continue his eastward push and capture the Imagawa-held Yoshida Castle. This would effectively push all remaining Imagawa influence out of Mikawa. However, it would also expose just how weak.
Okay. Interesting. And I guess Oda Nobunaga is descendant of the Taira, right?
The Imagawa had become
The
since
Taira.
Yoshimoto's death. Ieyasu, realizing that the Imagawa had little to no allies remaining, and their status minuscule among their more powerful neighbors, it was now time to bring their reign to an end. To do this effectively, and without concern for hostile aid from neighboring clans, Ieyasu began talks with Takeda Shingen, fresh off of his war with Uesugi Kenshin, where he had effectively seized all of Shinano province. The two worked out a deal where Shingen would march south to claim Suruga, while Ieyasu would continue east to capture Totomi. Together, they would wipe the Imagawa off of the map.
Easy.
In 1568, the dual invasion began as Shingen led his forces into Suruga. In opposition to this development, in attempts to hold off Shingen from growing his sphere of influence, the Hojo quickly sent aid to the Imagawa in aims of holding off the Takeda advance.
Oh, now this is getting serious. All the clans are like allying each other.
Yet it would not be enough, and Ujizane was forced to flee into Totomi, where he would make refuge at Kakegawa. However, Kakegawa would soon be besieged by the Matsudaira. All hope was now gone for Ujizane. And instead of taking his own life like a true samurai, he chose to give in to Ieyasu's demands. Ujizane surrendered Totomi to the Matsudaira.
Can't blame him.
With the Imagawa now gone, their goals met and territory expanded, the short-lived alliance between the Matsudaira and Takeda came to its rightful end. 1 year later, Ieyasu petitioned Emperor Ogimachi to recognize his family ties to the Seiwa Genji, a branch of the Minamoto family, the original rulers of the first shogunate in Kamakura, a request which the emperor granted. Thus, now formally linked to the Minamoto, Ieyasu changed his family name from Matsudaira to now officially Tokugawa.
That explains that. Okay. That's why I was confused about the name Matsudaira Ieyasu. Like, that didn't sound right. Yeah, Tokugawa Ieyasu. That's what people know him as. Okay. Again, I hate the constant changing of name by everybody. It's so confusing. Seriously. Stop changing name for 2 seconds, please.
This formal linkage between the old family of the shogunate may not appear important or relevant right now. However, it still remains a prerequisite for any daimyo who wish to become shogun, as they needed to be able to trace their lineage back to the Minamoto family. So then, why do this now? Perhaps Tokugawa Ieyasu was just growing his renown. Or maybe he was planning
Pokemon evolution.
So, what?
Alright. So he's Tokugawa Ieyasu. Fair enough. Well then. It's just non-stop. I mean, clans rise and fall multiple times a year. I mean, it's just non-stop. Okay, good stuff. Next episode, Battle of Anigawa.
Go. In 1568, Oda Nobunaga did what had not been done in roughly 230 years. He had conquered the capital and essentially established a new regime. Under the ruse, his aim was to restore power to the Ashikaga shogunate. He had taken up the cause of Ashikaga Yoshiaki. Using his military might, he cut a bloody path to Kyoto and made Yoshiaki his new puppet shogun. Now his real aim laid before him.
Is Yoshiaki gonna be happy to be a puppet though? I don't think so.
With the power of the shogunate in his control, and the strength of his own clan and his allies at his back, Nobunaga would set out to unify the land, ending the chaos of the Sengoku Jidai and restoring peace to the nation. Of course, his first steps towards unification would be to secure central Japan, the Kinki region. The only clan that had physically stood in his way on his march to the capital was the Rokaku clan, who had since been crushed and subject to isolation in southern Omi.
Very small.
Below them, by 1569, the Kitabatake clan of Ise province would also fall to the influence of the Oda. However, not all clans decided to stand against the Oda, as when Nobunaga took the capital, the Tsutsui clan of Yamato province, in fear of the Oda, decided to abandon their Miyoshi allies and pledge their loyalty to Nobunaga.
Okay.
In addition, within Yamato province we can also see that Matsunaga Hisahide strategically pledged his allegiance to the Oda as well. If we remember back to episode 20, Hisahide had been a retainer of the Miyoshi, who had eventually split off with them to foster his own power.
He's a very nice guy.
He would go on to be instrumental in the assassination of Ashikaga Yoshiteru in 1565. The only other large clan that opposed Nobunaga in the central region was the Miyoshi. When Nobunaga had entered Kyoto, his forces had easily swept all Miyoshi influence out. Yet a larger conflict had arose to the west in Setsu province. Nobunaga's heroic commander, Shibata Katsuie, had engaged a larger Miyoshi force, holding them off and allowing the Oda to firmly secure the capital and the surrounding area without interference. And although hostilities remained between the Oda and Miyoshi, the last threat to Oda rule was none other than the radical Iko-Iki
It's always the damn monks.
warrior monks, who controlled various temples throughout the Kinki region and were largely based at the impenetrable temple fortress of Ishiyama Honganji. Conflict between the Oda and the Iko-Iki had become intense. Thus, much effort was put forth by Nobunaga to eradicate them and their power bases. Yet, besides the conflicts which raged across central Japan, things in the capital were somewhat peaceful. Under Nobunaga's iron grip, he worked to establish a new regime that would ensure stability and stand strong in the face of all who stood against him. Of course, his presence completely undermined the power of the new shogun Yoshiaki, who was supposed to be really the man in charge. Unfortunately, Yoshiaki had quickly realized that he had made the wrong choice when choosing a champion to carry him to the capital.
I mean, what do you expect? Like, in this time of warring state, you know, you're clearly just a puppet no matter what. Like, you literally know that you have no power yourself, and so you have to ask some big clan to help you get on the throne. So, like, you should be happy to be on the throne. I'm sure, like, you're living a lavish life of luxury, and, you know, why would you complain? Like, you clearly have no power outside of, like, whatever clan helps you, so what did you expect?
Now it was obvious he was simply meant to be a puppet of the Oda. Nobunaga had skillfully kept his status in an odd form of limbo in aims to keep the power he held over the shogunate and Kyoto, making sure that no one truly knew where he lay in the hierarchy of the capital. Yoshiaki, in attempts to formally lower the position of Nobunaga, had offered him the position of Kanrei, the shogunal deputy, a role beneath the shogun, an offer which Nobunaga soundly refused. Even the emperor tried to force Nobunaga into becoming the new Kanrei, yet still, he remained free of such titles and status.
But again, same thing with the emperor, like, he's just some old guy, you don't have power for like hundreds of years at this point. Seriously. Clearly, Nobunaga operates beyond the, you know, family blood thing of, you know, I have a great family, so I have power, so you listen to me. Clearly, he operates beyond that.
He understood that to accept such a role would make him no different than all the others who had dominated the shogunate and Kyoto before him, and his ambition was far above theirs. In early 1570, Nobunaga wished to solidify who his allies and enemies were. He pressured Yoshiaki into requesting that all daimyo in the central region come to Kyoto in an act of faith towards the shogun and the new regime. Any who did not attend would be seen as rivals to the Oda. Surprisingly, Daimyo Asakura Yoshikage of Echizen refused the call. If we remember from the previous episode, Asakura Yoshikage had been Ashikaga Yoshiaki's champion and host for some time before Yoshiaki had eventually lost faith in him and left to join the Oda. Yet now, as Yoshiaki had realized his true role was to be that of Nobunaga's pawn, he may have secretly kept up correspondence with Yoshikage in aims that he may come to liberate the capital and push out the Oda. Nobunaga had definitely been feeling the rise in tension between him and Yoshiaki, and thus began suspecting that Yoshiaki was conspiring with other clans. This refusal by Yoshikage to come to Kyoto brought to light his suspicions, and was all the justification Nobunaga needed to declare the Asakura an enemy of the state. In the spring of 1570, Nobunaga set out for Echizen at the head of a grand army in aims to conquer the province. The Oda would of course call for the aid of the loyal Tokugawa Ieyasu, who marched with an army of his own towards the Echizen border. The only clan who stood between Nobunaga's forces and the Asakura were the Azai, who, if we remember back from episode 21, had become allies with the Oda due to the marriage between Azai Nagamasa and Oda Nobunaga's sister, Oichi. Nobunaga probably figured that due to their alliance, the Azai would likely allow the Oda and Tokugawa forces free passage through their territory. And at first, it appeared as such, as the armies began making their way through Upper Omi province. However, there must have been a deep internal conflict brewing within Azai Nagamasa, as his clan had been long-time allies with the Asakura. This new alliance he had made with the Oda definitely served a purpose, yet whichever side he took, he would be dishonorably betraying an ally.
Yeah, so choose the winning side. You know what I mean?
Thus, feeling bound to the clan he had been allied to much longer, Nagamasa eventually came to the hard decision to side with the Asakura against Nobunaga. This came just as Oda forces were pushing into Echizen, when suddenly the Azai began striking out at their rear. Nobunaga was now surrounded by enemies.
Well, I guess actually, yeah, now that you mention it, that's actually an advantage, yeah? You've let them be at peace, passing by, but then suddenly they're surrounded in enemy territory. Interesting.
Luckily for him, with the Tokugawa army at his back, Nobunaga's forces were able to fend off the Azai clan's defection and pull out to make a full retreat without losing massive casualties. However, now knowing that both the Azai and Asakura stood against him, Nobunaga began preparations to wipe them both out. His initial target would be none other than the Azai power base of Odani Castle. By midsummer, Nobunaga and Ieyasu set out again, this time in aims to clear out the treacherous Azai clan first. Wary of another attack from the rear, Nobunaga positioned Shibata Katsuie at the head of a small but elite garrison at Chokoji in Omi province. This extra step of preparation completely paid off, as the Rokaku clan would attempt to seize the opportunity of Nobunaga's absence to retake lost territory, as a Rokaku army numbering around 4,000 would march to lay siege to Chokoji. And although he was severely outnumbered,
I mean, this guy, we've already proven, Shibata Katsuie is like the ultimate defender, so...
Katsuie's small garrison held firm, continuously harassing the attackers by launching night raids against Rokaku positions, and eventually dealing so much damage to the attackers that the Rokaku were finally forced to abandon the siege. Afterwards,
what I'm finding out looking at this series, right, is that Nobunaga is kind of the same as like Napoleon and maybe Alexander the Great and some of the great like conquerors and generals of history, is that they have a lot of great generals under them. That's not often, you know, talked about, but, you know, except if you dive deep like we're doing right now. But yeah, like clearly, you know, having like such amazing subordinate generals and all that that can, you know, win battle by themselves is really important, yeah. And yeah, seems like Nobunaga had quite a few guys like that, you know. Hideyoshi, Shibata Katsuie, yeah.
Their reduced numbers would eventually allow the Oda to force the Rokaku into submission. Back on the war front, as Nobunaga carved a bloody path through Omi, Nagamasa had quickly called the Asakura clan for aid, to which Asakura Yoshikage sent out an army under the command of Asakura Kagetake. This combined Azai Asakura army, which numbered roughly around 18,000, immediately moved to meet the Oda, who were in July laying siege to the Azai stronghold of Yokoyama. The Oda Tokugawa army, who numbered around 28,000 strong, quickly turned to face the Azai Asakura forces who were amassing to the north of the Ane River. However, as soon as Nobunaga drew up to face them, the Azai Asakura forces pulled back. Upon seeing his enemies withdrawing, Nobunaga ordered the siege of Yokoyama to resume. Yet on the night of July 29th, the Azai Asakura army reappeared and were now heading towards the Oda encampment. Fortunately for Nobunaga, his scouts were able to detect the movements of the Azai Asakura forces. Thus, Nobunaga once again quickly...
I mean, it seems kind of hard to miss 18,000 men army. You know, they can't move that fast. Yeah.
redeployed his forces. On the left side, he sent the Tokugawa army under the command of Ieyasu, who was being aided by one of his finest commanders, Honda Tadakatsu, while the Oda took to the right side, with Nobunaga holding firm alongside notable figures such as Maeda Toshi.
I mean, this seems doomed already. Like, the Asakura, they have to cross the river, and they are outnumbered by like 10,000. You know, the only way they would have won is if they forced the Oda to be the one to cross the river.
Chie, Niwa Nagahide, and Hashiba Hideyoshi. Once battle was joined on the morning of the 30th, it became clear that the Asakura portion of the army had taken the left side and the Azai had taken the right. Thus, it was the Tokugawa who were to deal with the Asakura, while Nobunaga had to contend with Nagamasa. Immediately, Nagamasa's charge hit Nobunaga's line hard and fast, and a brutal struggle erupted as the sun began to rise. Although Nobunaga held the advantage of being on the defensive, the aggressiveness of the Azai attack began pushing the Oda forces back, so much so that Nobunaga became concerned that he may need to order a retreat. Yet, things were going the opposite for the Tokugawa, as the Asakura hadn't put up nearly as hard a fight on the left. As Ieyasu began to control the situation on his side of the battlefield, he began sending extra troops over to aid the Oda line, crashing into the flank of the Azai. With the addition of the Tokugawa soldiers, Nobunaga was finally able to hold his ground. And as soon as the Asakura army began to break and rout, Nagamasa realized all hope was fading, and ordered his forces to retreat. Nobunaga had won the Battle of Anegawa, yet his
But once again, yeah, I mean, to my point, it's really like, not just him, it's really like some of the commanders around him that are great. And, you know, we see like, you could say it's part of the quality of some of those legendary leaders, right, is that they were able to nurture and get the loyalty of great commanders, right? But man, this really is like showing that, yeah, like he didn't win himself. If someone else had been commanding, you know, the other side, maybe they wouldn't have been able to send reinforcement and Nobunaga's army might have broken.
Forces were severely diminished, so much so that he would not be able to sustain any further push against the Azai power base at Odani. Although the war resumed between the Oda and the Azai Asakura coalition, Nobunaga would be forced to turn his attention elsewhere, as it was now apparent that he was becoming increasingly surrounded by enemies. Several months later,
I was gonna say, like, the thing I'm feeling is that on the side of the Ojo, Uesugi, and Takeda, like, you know, that's some powerful enemies, and so far, you know, they're on the other side, but what if they decide to join in?
Later, Nagamasa would avenge his defeat at Anegawa by crushing an Oda army at Usayama Castle near Otsu and killing one of Nobunaga's brothers, Oda Nobuharu. However, the war was far from over, and soon Nobunaga would be able to strike out against the Azai and Asakura once again, in aims to finally finish them off. So,
Man's anxiety up, that's for sure. Okay, great stuff. Next one, the Massacre of Montier. Alright then.
What had once been a manageable situation for Oda Nobunaga had now turned into a precarious one. By 1570, the Oda clan now rested between enemies to the north and enemies to the west. along with the...
Actually, looking at the map, the white is the Uesugi, right? So I guess the Uesugi are kind of far away. I don't know what the green, orange, and gray-blue clans are, if they're actually a threat. Yeah. I guess the big threat might be the Takeda on the right. Maybe.
Clan now rested between enemies to the north and enemies to the west, along with the threat of the radical Iko-Iki sprinkled within. Luckily, Nobunaga was surrounded by competent and loyal commanders who each exhibited the very finest of strategic thought and battlefield heroism found throughout feudal Japan. I have touched on many of his retainers before. Figures such as Shibata Katsuie, Maeda Toshie, Niwa Nagahide, and Hashiba Hideyoshi.
I think Shibata is my favorite so far. Hideyoshi is pretty cool too.
Yet another prominent figure was about to enter the mix, Akechi Mitsuhide. If we remember back to episode 22, Mitsuhide had been instrumental in getting Ashikaga Yoshiaki to reach out to Nobunaga, granting him the justification he needed for his march on the capital. Thus, Nobunaga owed much of his current power to Mitsuhide. In return, Mitsuhide had become one of Nobunaga's senior retainers, and one of the more important figures leading Nobunaga's armies against his foes to the west. For the most part, the main threat to the Oda rule in the west was the Miyoshi clan, who had previously held the highest amount of influence over Kyoto and the Ashikaga shogunate.
It is confusing because they had the same color as Nobunaga.
Yet, ever since the death of their former daimyo, Miyoshi Nagayoshi, in 1564, the clan had become disjointed and feeble. So much so that they were unable to stop the Oda from sweeping them out of the capital, and were now being slowly pushed out of Honshu by Nobunaga's armies. However, this also brought the Oda closer to another major threat, the main power base of the Iko-Iki at Ishiyama Honganji in modern-day Osaka. The radical followers of the Jodo Shinshu faith known as the Iko-Iki had established control over a plethora of locations, and although they were not formally linked together, it can be seen that they all upheld the same mindsets and stood together against common enemies. The Iko-Iki had become a larger nuisance to the Oda than many of their actual clan rivals. By the 1570s, the Iko-Iki had become a major powerhouse throughout central Japan, even ruling over the entirety of Kaga province to the north. This was due to their various temples, which acted as hubs of influence, their strong economical power, having control over many important trade routes, and their appeal to all the suppressed lower classes of society.
Yeah, I mean, religious, like appealing to religion is ultra powerful, right? People will fight for you.
Attracting anyone from Ronin to peasant. They were vicious hornets who every daimyo feared, and their most formidable nest was known to be the most heavily fortified temple in the entire country, Ishiyama Honganji. Nobunaga knew the Iko-Iki needed to be eradicated if he was to have any semblance of stability over the Kinki region. Thus, in August of
I wonder if he ever considered the other option, you know, like converting to their religion and trying to, you know, pacify things that way by, you know, making everybody believe that, you know, I'm just like you, I'm into this religion, so we're all good, let's stop fighting. I wonder if there was ever even an option.
1570, roughly a month after his victories at Anegawa, Nobunaga and Mitsuhide began efforts to lay siege to Ishiyama Honganji. He ordered the construction of various fortifications around the vast complex, to which the Iko-Iki forces responded by launching a massive night raid against Oda positions a month later, severely weakening the siege lines and allowing the warrior monks to continue to hold out.
Damn.
It should also be noted that the Iko-Iki had heavily adopted the use of Western firearms and began using them impressively. Behind their
Man, in Mountain Blade Soku that I'm playing right now, you can recruit monk, even though, you know, usually like just 1 or 2 at a time, because the temples want you to donate a lot of money if you want to recruit a lot of monks, and it's kind of like too much early game. So I haven't really recruited monks, but maybe I should look into them, because looking at this, the monks seem broken. I don't know if they're broken in game, but man, the monks are broken.
Walls of Ishiyama Honganji, the monks were able to effectively use their matchlock tippo to formally hold off any attempt by the Oda to assault the fortress. This may have left a lasting impact on Nobunaga, who was an ardent practitioner of Western firearms himself, as the way in which the monks used their teppo behind fortifications proved to be devastatingly efficient. This ensured that the siege of Ishiyama Honganji would continue indefinitely. Yet the warrior monks of Honganji were not the only militant holdout of monks that had earned Nobunaga's aggression. A year prior, he had lost a battle to the monks of Ogie Castle, resulting in the death of his brother Oda Nobuoki. And two other sites he would come to battle the monks at would be Mount Hiei and Nagashima. And it is the story of Mount Hiei that can be seen as a turning point for Nobunaga and the most brutal in terms of his conflicts against the monks. As the war continued between the Oda and the Azai Asakura coalition, following the Battle of Anegawa, the Tendai monks of Enryakuji Temple atop Mount Hiei had become equally hostile to the Oda and began lending their support to the Azai and Asakura. But since Mount Hiei sat literally just to the north of Kyoto, this could not be allowed, as it posed an immediate threat not only to the capital, but also to Nobunaga's lines of communication. Now, before I tell of Nobunaga's actions against Mount Hiei, I want to first give some brief background information on Mount Hiei and its significance. The nearly 800-year-old temple of Enryakuji atop Mount Hiei was a cultural mega-center.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure when we were learning about some of the other period, and especially maybe Heian, a lot of emperors would often do pilgrimage, and I think that was one of the places they would go to, one of the important places.
Not only was it the headquarters of the Tendai sect of Buddhism in Japan, but also its position within the area known as the Demon Gate signified that it stood as a shield protecting the capital from evil. It also housed one of the largest armies of warrior monks in the entire country, who had frequently marched down to Kyoto to enforce their religious control over the city.
Yeah.
Knowing this information may help us better understand Nobunaga's next set of actions, as what he would do was completely unexpected. Perhaps he had simply grown weary of being constantly surrounded, or maybe he wished to make a statement against all temples that opposed him. Whatever the case, what he would do to Mount Hiei would simply be remembered as an atrocity. In 1571, commanding an army around 30,000 strong.
I mean, I know that Nobunaga is like, in all the media that I've seen him, he's definitely like a mixed character, right? He's not really always portrayed as a good guy. He's definitely, often portrayed as like a brutal guy. So I guess this is why.
And against the wishes of many of his retainers, Nobunaga ordered the mountain surrounded. He then directed his soldiers to begin scaling the side of the mountain, killing anyone who stood in their path. Once at the top, they set fire to the historic temple and slaughtered anyone who attempted to flee. By the end, Enryakuji was reduced to ashes, and thousands of civilians and monks alike were dead. Surviving Tendai monks would later be allowed to rebuild Enryakuji, yet Mount Hiei would never be able to have an army again. This is really where we can begin to see a change within Oda Nobunaga, where previously he could be seen as one of the more unorthodox leaders in feudal Japan. The massacre at Mount Hiei starts to showcase a more cruel side to him. That same year, Oda forces under the...
I mean, what can you even say? It's like, it's always one of those things where like you want to make in war, some commander wants to make an example by, being cruel and killing everybody and all that, so that it kind of kills other resistance in other places. But most of the time it's kind of like backfiring because the other players that are holding on will be like, okay, well, we might as well fight to the last man because, this guy is too fucked up and he's gonna kill us all no matter what. And so in the end, I feel like in a lot of times it's kind of backfire, right? It just makes the other side fight even harder, yeah? And a lot of commanders make that mistake throughout history. The example that ends up being like more of a symbol of fighting even harder against you. It's a classic, yeah. It's a classic.
Command of Shibata Katsuie and Sakuma Nobumori also launched the first of 4 sieges against the Iko-Iki stronghold of Nagashima in Ise province. Their first attempt would fail, yet the Oda would maintain the pressure. By 1572, Back in the capital, things were abysmal between Nobunaga and Shogun Yoshiaki. It was clear Yoshiaki was now desperately reaching out to various daimyo in attempts to drive out the Oda. Yet, as we have seen thus far, no one has proven capable enough to do so. Yoshiaki needed someone strong, a mighty clan that rivaled the Oda in size and number, a clan that could easily reach the Oda. The two most realistic candidates for Yoshiaki were none other than the Mori clan to the west, or the Takeda clan to the east.
I mean, both pretty damn strong, yeah. But the Mori are kind of far away.
Of the two, the Mori were unlikely to head to war against the Oda just yet, and this was for two reasons. First off, the Mori were recently at war with the Otomo clan of Kyushu, another powerhouse to the southwest. However, even more pressing was Morimoto Nari's failing health. By the summer of 1571, Motonari, the great patriarch of the Mori clan who had seen the clan grow from insignificant to mighty, had finally passed away.
He was definitely one of the best. I mean, maybe not as talked about, but from what we've seen in this series, he was a pretty damn great leader.
Most likely fearing a drop in stability if they were to march east against the Oda. Motonari's grandson and current head of the Mori clan, Mori Terumoto, would decide to ultimately not move against the Oda just yet, although they would inevitably go to war in the years to come. The story was different to the east, as the Takeda had become arguably the strongest power east of Mino. Takeda Shingen now stood in a prime position to lead a massive army westward to crush Nobunaga.
I mean, he struggled a lot against Kenshin though, so... yeah, I don't know.
Ultimately, we will see that it is the legendary Takeda Shingen who will answer Yoshiaki's call for aid and embark on his own march to the capital.
Alright then. Alright. Well, we'll see how that turns out. Great stuff. Let's continue. Fascinating stuff, I should say.
1572. The situation in and around the capital was devastating. Oda Nobunaga, the leader...
Wait. I can't say it. Mikatagara. What is this hard to say?
...of the once minor power from Owari province had risen to prominence and taken Kyoto and the shogunate captive. Using his mighty armies and iron grip, Nobunaga had laid siege to central Japan, going to war with all who stood against him. So far, we have seen his battles against the Miyoshi, the Azai, the Asakura, and the radical followers of the Jodo Shinshu faith known as the Iko Iki. And while his followers viewed him as a visionary trying to unify the land, his enemies obviously viewed him as a power-hungry tyrant. And no one felt his oppression more than Shogun Ashikaga Yoshiaki. Yoshiaki had of course been delivered to the capital by Nobunaga. Yet instead of simply enjoying the luxury of his position as shogun, he followed in the same footsteps as the previous shogun Ashikaga Yoshiteru.
Like, Did is complaining despite doing nothing. Like, someone else did all the work and you're still complaining that you don't have all the power.
Who had made an attempt to break the shogunate free from external influences. Yoshiaki had initially believed that he was to have independence and power once he was formally made the shogun. Yet in reality, all the power rested in the hands of the cunning Nobunaga. Thus, for the past several years, Yoshiaki had been reaching out to many clans in central Japan, requesting they take up arms against the Oda in attempts to drive them out of the capital. However, by 1572, we can see that none have proven capable enough to do so. This leads us to his latest bid, reaching out to the Mori and the Takeda. As we established in the last video, the Mori were unwilling to head to war against the Oda at this time, most likely due to other pressing issues I have previously highlighted. Yet the situation was different for the Takeda. In the east, the balance of power had changed drastically ever since the fall of the Imagawa in 1568. This left the three most powerful clans in the east, the Takeda, the Hojo, and the Uesugi, in a constant state of conflict. with the most noticeable exchange of territory.
Which is why, again, is it really smart for the Takeda to attack the Oda?
Being the Takeda taking over a portion of Kotsuke. And it was the Takeda, led by the legendary Takeda Shingen, who now appeared to be the greatest power in the East. And this was for several reasons. First off was Shingen's sphere of influence, controlling 3 rich provinces, thereby granting him the capability to field a massive army. Not to mention the fact that his clan was impressively stable, even in an age ripe with internal betrayal.
Okay.
However, this stability had not come without casualties, as in 1567 he was forced to order his firstborn son and heir, Takeda Yoshinobu, to commit seppuku, following disagreements between the two and a failed attempt to rally Shingen's loyal generals against him and seize power. After Yoshinobu's death, Shingen's somewhat inbred and bastard son, Takeda Katsuyori, now stood to be the heir to the clan.
Can I get some context on that? Like, just said like this, it sounds like a random insult, like you don't like the character. What's the context on that? Wow. I mean, fair enough. Fair enough.
But to add to Shingen's stability, he also possessed one of the finest war bands in the entire country. What had previously been known as the 24 generals of Takeda Shingen had indeed shrunk over time, yet we can still see important figures such as Baba Nobuharu, Kosaka Masanobu, Yamagata Masakage, Naito Masatoyo, and Sanada Yukitaka, along with his sons.
Sanada, yeah.
These and other generals were behind many of Shingen's finest victories, and were a prime example why the Takeda were able to flourish and grow.
So, same thing as the Oda, yeah, like, you know, the leader himself is great, but a lot of great general under him, so he doesn't have to do everything himself.
Grow to their current size and prominence. Although outside of the Takeda clan, 2 other external factors had also given rise to Shingen's position. The most obvious was the death of Hojo Ujiyasu, the Lion of Sagami. Ujiyasu had been a mighty daimyo, maintaining Hojo rule over Kanto, albeit with little expansion as well. He had frequently fought against the Takeda and Uesugi, yet in 1570, he finally passed away. Fearing a drop in stability if the wars continued, his son Hojo Ujimasa quickly made peace with Shingen. However, an arguably greater threat to the Takeda was the formidable Uesugi Kenshin, who had valiantly fought.
Which, once again, like, do you really want to attack the Oda? You know, while there's a possibility of the Uesugi taking advantage of that to attack you again when they're so strong.
Shingen to a standstill years ago at Kawanakajima. Yet, in recent years, it appeared Kenshin was less inclined to do battle with Shingen, and more interested in expanding Uesugi influence to the northwest. As by the 1570s, we can see that the Uesugi clan had pushed into Eichu, subjugating the local Jinbo clan and seizing the entirety of the province.
Okay.
Although this of course brought Kenshin into further conflict against the Iko-Iki, who ruled over the neighboring province of Kaga.
Which now sounds like, you know, might be a good common point between the Oda and the Uesugi. They both hate the Iko-Iki, so maybe they should ally.
It is these factors that may have aided in Shingen's decision to answer Shogun Yoshiaki's pleas for aid. However, if he was to go to war with the Oda, he would first need to deal with their Tokugawa allies. The Takeda had actually already gone to war with the Tokugawa in 1571, when Shingen began launching attacks against the Tokugawa fortress of Takatenjin. Thus, continuing a more determined offensive against them would not be seen as out of the ordinary. On top of that, there is another reason why Shingen would want to head west. It is clear that Takeda Shingen for some time now had desired to rule not just his region, but in fact the entire land. However, this dream had become an unrealistic one due to his current position in correlation to other powerful rivals in the east. Yet by 1572, with all of the established reasons I have just listed, Shingen now possessed the prime capability to bring war to the Oda, and perhaps launch a campaign to seize the entire country for himself. What is also of extreme importance to note, and perhaps an even greater reason for Shingen to march on the capital, is the fact that the Takeda clan, if need be, could trace their lineage back to the Seiwa Genji branch of the Minamoto clan, essentially meaning
another one.
That Takeda Shingen could officially become the new shogun if he...
I'm still surprised that they care that much about this, you know, like tracing back the lineage. I mean, if you're strong enough to take over the capital and all that, you could just say I'm shogun even if I don't have the blood, no? I mean, you know.
If he were to take Kyoto, destroy the Ashikaga, and create a Takeda shogunate. Of all the threats Nobunaga had to face, the Takeda would soon shoot to the forefront.
Yeah, this is bad, like he's still fighting the monks, the Azai, and the Yoshikage, was it?
As they were indeed the mightiest of all Nobunaga's rivals. Beginning in late 1572, Shingen embarked on his grand conquest against the Oda. As previously established, his initial task would be to subdue the Tokugawa clan. His first target would be the Tokugawa mountain stronghold of Futamata, an ideal spot he could then use as a base of operations as he marched against the new Tokugawa power base of Hamamatsu. Shingen entrusted his son and heir, Katsuyori, to seize the castle. And it is here that we can see that Katsuyori was actually a competent commander, cutting the water supply.
So not just an inbred bastard then. Okay, good for him.
Supply to Futamata, thus causing it to quickly surrender to the Takeda by January of 1573. Daimyo Tokugawa Ieyasu was now definitely in a precarious situation, as Shingen was now marching through Totomi at the head of a massive army, numbering around 28,000 strong. Upon hearing of Shingen's advance, Oda Nobunaga quickly sent aid to Ieyasu, whose numbers now grew to a meager 11,000. Shingen, understanding his real target was Nobunaga, knew that the Tokugawa were not capable of stopping him in the field. Yet they needed to be dealt with nonetheless. Thus, he initially planned on leaving a token force behind to lay siege to Ieyasu's stronghold at Hamamatsu, locking the Tokugawa forces down, while his main body pressed forth against the Oda. However, in reality, everything solely depended on what action Ieyasu would take. All of the Tokugawa and reinforcing Oda generals agreed that defending Hamamatsu was their best bet on survival. Even if Shingen left a token force behind to mask the castle, Tokugawa forces stood a better chance of breaking the siege and striking out at the Takeda rear than actually attempting a full assault against Shingen.
Yeah.
Fighting the Takeda in the open was also discouraged due to the growing legend of the Takeda cavalry. Throughout Shingen's campaigns, his cavalry had gained vast renown for their skill, ferocity, and numbers. So much so that they had earned the nickname the Demon Horsemen of Kai.
Yeah. I think I've heard that name from Samurai Warrior also.
Breaking fear into anyone who dared face the Takeda in the field. But of course, a full frontal assault was exactly what Ieyasu had in mind. If one thing could be said about Ieyasu, he had a fighting spirit. Even when severely disadvantaged, he would rather boldly take the fight to his enemy than hide behind a wall. Thus, he gave the order to make ready for battle and marched out from Hamamatsu to engage the Takeda forces that had been amassing just to the north at Mikatagahara.
Seems like a terrible idea, but I know the name Ieyasu and I know that it probably doesn't die or anything, so it might work out.
Shingen, upon hearing of Ieyasu's march, immediately deployed his army in a formation to envelop the Tokugawa. As snow began to fall on January 25th, the battle began. The Tokugawa took the initiative, open firing on the Takeda forward ranks. Ieyasu had hoped that by implementing mass firearms, he would discourage the use of the Takeda cavalry, and at first it seemed like that might be the case, as Shingen began his actions by ordering a general charge of his vanguard samurai under the command of Naito Masatoyo, who began clashing with frontline Oda troops. Under extreme pressure, the Oda Tokugawa line held strong against the initial wave of Tokugawa forces. Yet,
But the
it was then
cavalry...
that Shingen unleashed two waves of his demon horsemen. The first wave was under the command of Yamagata Masakage. The Takeda cavalry shredded through the Oda lines before pulling out for the second wave led by Takeda Katsuyori. The second wave crashed into the Tokugawa main body, annihilating the Tokugawa region.
That's actually, I play Mountain Blade right now. I make a line of Teppo guns. Beyond the Teppo guns, I have like pikemans and samurais. So when the enemy is like charging, I let my Teppo guns shoot. And when they're like 50 meters away or something, I get the cavalry that's like hiding somewhere in the forest or somewhere other way from the map to try to come from the side. Then I get the pikemen and samurai in front of the Teppo, and boom.
Dissolve, sending Ieyasu's forces reeling. Ieyasu, still holding strong, attempted to rally his faltering army. Yet as his forces began to break, Shingen bared down upon him with everything, ordering a full assault of his main body. As the Takeda forces closed in on Ieyasu, he began to engage in melee combat while desperately attempting to issue commands. Seeing the disarray of the situation, the commander Ieyasu had left in charge of Hamamatsu, Natsume Yoshinobu, quickly rode in to convince Ieyasu to call for a full retreat. When Ieyasu refused, Yoshinobu took control of the situation. He grabbed the reins of Ieyasu's horse and spun him around. He then gave Ieyasu's horse a hard...
Kind of surprised so far, like, Ieyasu seemed smarter than this, but, you know, going to this battle so outnumbered seemed pretty stupid, and now not even willing to retreat to fight another day. I'm surprised.
Jab to its rear, which caused it to charge off back towards the castle. Yoshinobu followed this up by attempting to mislead the Takeda by crying out that he was Ieyasu, and then rushed into the fray where he would be slain. Ieyasu would make it back into Hamamatsu with a small contingent of samurai. Immediately, the Tokugawa retainer Tori Mototada began barring the main gate. Yet it was then that Ieyasu had a brilliant yet risky idea. He stopped Mototada from closing the main gate, and instead ordered it to be kept open for any other survivors. In addition, he also ordered bonfires to be lit and a drum to be played to aid in guiding his scattered soldiers back home. He knew that this could be regarded by the Takeda two different ways.
Reinforcement or something?
They could either see it for what it was, an open invitation to charge in and seize the castle, or, with any luck, they might perceive it as a trap and choose not to engage. Fortunately for Ieyasu, when the Takeda commanders Baba Nobuharu and Yamagata Masakage closed in on Hamamatsu, they did indeed perceive it as possibly a trap by the Tokugawa.
Okay. I mean, good one, Ieyasu. It was kind of, you know, wasn't the best move to fight them in open battle like this, but, you know, at least he is redeeming himself, yeah.
Tokugawa, thus deciding to make camp and watch over the fortress for any further developments. In aims to drive off this small contingent of Takeda forces outside of Hamamatsu, Tokugawa forces took action later that evening, launching a successful night raid. Catching the Takeda soldiers off guard, they pushed them back to a small ravine where many Takeda troops were trapped and gunned down by Tokugawa matchlock Teppo. With winter setting in, and an unwillingness to engage in a winter siege now seeing the boldness of the Tokugawa, Shingen ordered his forces to return home until the thaw of spring, where he could then resume his campaign.
Damn. It kind of worked out, I guess, in the end. I mean, might still have been better to avoid that massive battle, but not bad, Ieyasu.
Ieyasu had narrowly survived and succeeded in temporarily halting the Takeda advance. Months later, in the spring of 1573, Shingen began a new campaign against the Tokugawa, this time striking deep into Mikawa. Once again, the threat of his massive army put Ieyasu in a tight position, although tragedy would soon occur for the Takeda. Takeda Shingen, at the height of his power, died.
Damn.
Some say he had long been ill and finally succumbed to sickness, while another plausible scenario indicates that while he was laying siege to the Tokugawa stronghold of Noda, he was shot by a Tokugawa sniper. Whatever the case, Shingen was dead, and the Takeda were robbed of their...
Surprised such a crazy, important figure, like, there's not a clear answer of what happened. Yeah, okay. I mean, to say it's a big loss is an understatement. He has a lot of great commander, but, you know, he's still, like, the glue that keeps them together. Like, are they going to follow anybody else as loyally? That's the question, but yeah, damn. One of the most interesting characters of this whole period of history. Really enjoyed learning about him. Yeah.
Greatest leader. Initially, they made attempts to keep Shingen's death a secret in aims to keep his legendary status and fear he instilled alive and well. Yet, in time, the truth got out, and formally, power passed on to his son, Takeda Katsuyori,
the inbred bastard,
who maintained his father's stalwart devotion to march west and take on the Oda. For a final note, it is said that upon hearing of Shingen's passing, his great rival, Uesugi Kenshin, who had engaged him in 5 epic clashes over the Kawanakajima plain, wept at the loss of such a worthy adversary.
It's really rival Yari. I mean, seriously.
So,
seriously. Damn, that's a shame. That's a shame. You know, I'm pretty much guessing that it's not gonna work out for the Takeda, right? They're not going to beat Nobunaga. But, you know, what if Shingen was still there? Like, how different would things would have been? I mean, let's see what happens, because I don't actually know the details. Yeah. Okay. Man, so much craziness happening. I mean, I'm guessing it was also, like, kind of old, no? Takeda Shingen. I don't know. I feel like it's been on for, like, a while in the story. Load. The siege of Odani Castle.
By 1573, Oda Nobunaga was starting to get a grip on the situation in central Japan. The once powerful Miyoshi clan were being ousted from the mainland. The temple fortresses of the Iko-Iki were tied down in a state of constant siege. The Azai and Asakura proved to be incapable of overcoming the Oda, and the great Takeda Shingen supposedly had died, halting the Takeda clan on their march west against Nobunaga. The fog of turmoil was finally lifting, and things were finally coming together. The Kinki region would soon be fully in Nobunaga's grasp. The main threat to Oda power had been the Takeda clan when Shingen began his march west. Nobunaga surely viewed it as dire circumstances. However, he had to rely on Tokugawa Ieyasu being capable of slowing down the Takeda, as Nobunaga could not move for fear of the Azai and Asakura taking advantage of his absence. The best he could do was send aid and pray. The Takeda had made it far, pushing deep into Tokugawa territory as far as Mikawa, and even crossing the mountain passes between Shinano and Mino to seize the Oda castle of Iwamura. Yet, the supposed death of Shingen halted the Takeda onslaught. The new head of the clan, Takeda Katsuyori, would devote himself to carrying on Shingen's plans, yet it would be another year before he resumed any major action. Knowing Nobunaga...
I mean, I guess you can't help it, right? It's like, my dad died and instantly continuing what he was doing. He really needs to consolidate power, and there's probably like a lot to do, you know, politically before continuing the war. Yeah.
Naga now faced a plethora of foes. The rebellious shogun, Ashikaga Yoshiaki, began bolstering his position in Kyoto in anticipation for the capitulation of the Oda.
I mean, the Oda are strong, but it's still not looking good right now. He literally has enemy on all sides. It's kind of so undead, huh? And while, you know, individually none of them can beat him, you know, it's really like a war on all fronts, and it's not looking good. I mean, even inside his own conquered territory, he has the monks, it's not great. Not great at all.
Unfortunately for him, Shingen's death meant the Oda weren't going anywhere, and soon Oda forces surrounded the shogun's castle of Nijo. Yet it was here that the emperor intervened and caused both sides to agree to an uneasy truce, a truce that would undoubtedly not last. By August of 1573, Nobunaga, alongside Hashiba Hideyoshi, once again attempted another siege of the Iko-iki stronghold at Nagashima in Ise province. Yet once again, the Oda forces would be repelled from the castle.
My question with this is, why do they keep doing it like an attack? Why don't they do a starving siege? I don't really know the logistic or how the place looks, right? But why do they keep doing an attack? I mean, they keep showing out of this place, and look at this. Like, it's obvious you're fucked. I mean, you have to like climb something like so fucking steep. Yeah, no surprise you can't get in, so can't you starve the place?
This defeat brought Yoshiaki renewed confidence, causing him to openly rally against Nobunaga for the second time that year, shattering their flimsy truce. This time, the shogun marched an army out to the famous Uji Bridge, hoping to tie Nobunaga down while the Azai, Asakura, and Iko-iki all launched simultaneous attacks against him. However, Yoshiaki had severely miscalculated, as none of his allies were able to attack Nobunaga before Nobunaga's forces fell on the shoguns, crushing his army and breaking through into Nijo Castle. Utterly crushed, Yoshiaki surrendered and begged to keep his life, a request Nobunaga granted.
Really?
Yet, we can see here he was finally at his wit's end with Yoshiaki and shogunal politics.
I mean, it's like at this point, what do you do? Yeah.
Knowing that he was now the unquestionable power in the capital, Nobunaga would strip the shogun of all authority and send him into exile.
Fair enough.
Ashikaga would officially be no more, and with their fall, the shogunate was ultimately dismantled. The 237-year reign of the Ashikaga shogunate was over. And now, Nobunaga assumed full control over the capital, unburdened by the weight of status or position. With Yoshiaki finally out of his hair and the Takeda momentarily quiet, Nobunaga set out at the head of a grand army and aims to obliterate the last major clan rivals he had near the capital, the Azai and Asakura.
Yeah, it's time.
His initial target would once again be the Azai power base of Odani, a site which over the past 3 years had seen much fighting. Yet, with the Oda army on the march, Asakura Yoshikage quickly dispatched an army of 20,000 to aid the besieged Azai. This time, Nobunaga anticipated Asakura reinforcements and laid a trap which caught the Asakura army before they reached Odani. Ambushed and in a state of panic, the Asakura army fled back into Echizen, pursued by the main bulk of the Oda forces.
Easy peasy.
In sight of the approaching Oda army, Yoshikage opted to flee from his stronghold at Ichijo no Dani, which was then burned to the ground by the Oda. As Nobunaga's armies quickly enveloped his province, Yoshikage would eventually commit seppuku on September 16th.
That's simple.
And with his death, the Asakura clan was destroyed.
And the Azai are too small to resist now.
In addition, the province of Wakasa also fell to the Oda. For years, the province had been owned by a minor branch of the Takeda clan, yet due to infighting, the Asakura had exerted their influence over the area. Yet with the fall of the Asakura, both Echizen and Wakasa fell into Oda hands.
Easy peasy.
With the Asakura wiped out, Azai Nagamasa was now surrounded in Odani Castle, as Oda troops poured back over the border into Omi from Echizen to firmly continue the siege of his power base. Unable to repel the Oda forces no matter how hard he valiantly tried, Nagamasa knew he was beaten. Nagamasa, who was married to Nobunaga's sister Oichi, made an honorable gesture and released her and their daughters back into Nobunaga's care. Following this, he and his father, along with much of the Azai leadership, then committed seppuku. With this, the Azai clan...
I wonder if Nobunaga would have been merciful if the guy just gave up, right? You know, like... I don't know. Maybe. You know, in the end he didn't side with Nobunaga, but, there was a logical reason to side with the other side because of, honor and being allied with them for longer and all that. Yeah.
Clan were also destroyed. Nobunaga was victorious. In the aftermath of the conflict, the heads of both Azai Nagamasa and Asaka.
So yeah, now it's he found the Takeda, I'm out. I mean, yeah, it's too late now. If they had continued attacking the Oda while there was still the Azai and everybody else, but now it's too late.
Kura Yoshikage would be lacquered in gold and presented to Nobunaga at a great feast. In the case of the conquered territory, Nobunaga would bestow the newly acquired lands to some of his finest retainers. Portions of Echizen were divided between Maeda Toshie, Fuwa Mitsuharu, and Sasa Norimasa, while the rich Azai territory in Omi was given to none other than Hashiba Hideyoshi.
Damn.
So, what?
Hideyoshi just keeps rising. Man, that went way faster than I expected, yeah. Just like that. Okay. I mean, man. Oda is really conquering. I guess right now it still has the Takeda, but I don't feel like they have much to offer anymore at this point. I mean, it's either going to march to finish them off, or they're going to get out of the war. Yeah, that was a big blow to the hope of anybody taking down Nobunaga. Good stuff. Next episode, Thunder in the South. Load, please.
It has been decades since we last glanced at southern Japan. Although wars raged on the islands of Kyushu and Shikoku, for the most part, there had been little major exchange in territory. However, that was about to change in the early...
In my current playthrough of, again, Mountain Blade Soku, I started in Kyushu. I spent most of the early days on the island, just running around fighting bandits and looters and all that. But, eventually, because of watching the series, I was I kind of want to join Nobunaga. And so, yesterday I joined, I went to the mainland, traveled, and joined Nobunaga. At first as a mercenary, and finally as a retainer.
Early 1570s, as both the Shimazu and Chosokabe families began growing their power. Let us first start with the Shimazu clan of Satsuma, a once proud family who had nearly a century ago ruled over the majority of southern Kyushu. Yet infighting and uprisings had led to their tragic shattering, which saw their influence severely diminished. You can learn more about their collapse in episode 6 of this series. By 1566, power over the clan transferred to the steadfast Shimazu Yoshihiza, a man who was forced to endure much as the Shimazu clan was continually threatened by their hostile neighbors, paramount of which being the Ito and Kimotsuke. His father, Shimazu Takahiza, had done well to hold the clan together, bolstering its stability and positioning it as a conduit of Western trade and culture. Feeling the time to be ideal, he retired as head of the clan and allowed Yoshihiza to inherit control. For years now, the Shimazu had been engaged in a bitter war against the neighboring Kimotsuki clan of Osumi, whose power and rising influence had become a threat. And although the Shimazu province of Satsuma remained secure, the Kimotsuki had held the upper hand in their many battles against the Shimazu. Under the leadership of Kimotsuki Kanetsugu, the Kimotsuki now stood poised for greatness. However, his fortunes were about to change when in 1566, Yoshihiza amassed the Shimazu armies and struck out once again into Osumi. Where Kanetsugu had been victorious in the past, he now found defeat as the Shimazu armies captured Koyama Castle and continued on to drive back the Kimotsuki forces. Facing a total and utter collapse of his clan, Kanetsugu opted to commit seppuku, allowing the Shimazu to press on and secure the majority of the province. However, Kanetsugu's death would not mean the end of the Kimotsuki, as they would continue on and later end up becoming vassals to the Shimazu. The Shimazu victory over the Kimotsuki can be seen as a real turning point for the clan, as they recaptured a province they had not held in decades.
You don't have Miyazaki though. I don't know who. Well, I guess it was called Yuga at the time, the blue part. I don't know what clan it is.
Signaling renewed strength. However, one cannot ignore the importance of the Shimazu warband, as Yoshihisa's three brothers, Yoshihiro, Iehiza, and Toshihiza, would each come to exhibit exemplary and heroic service. The next threat the Shimazu would face would be the Ito clan of Hyuga, an arguably greater threat, especially due to the recent capture of the formidable border castle of Obi. By 1572, Daimyo Ito Yoshisuke struck out from Hyuga into Osumi in aims to expand his borders, marching with an army around 3,000 strong and alongside allies from the Sagara clan of Higo province. It is here we can begin to see the legend of Shimazu Yoshihiro, brother of the daimyo. When the Ito attacked, Yoshihiro was there to defend. Although he was severely outnumbered, he would still prove to be a highly skilled adversary, as the two forces would come to battle at Kizakihara. He first moved his small force against the advancing Sagara army. Using a very well-known strategy, he erected banners and positioned his soldiers in a way that completely caught the Sagara off guard, fooling them into believing the Shimazu army to be much larger than anticipated. They decided to pull back to Higo rather than face sure defeat at the hands of what they thought to be a massive Shimazu army. With the Ito army now alone, Yoshihiro rushed to meet them at Kakuto Castle, which the Ito had just begun laying siege to. The Ito attempted to storm the castle overnight, yet due to the determination of Yoshihiro and the fellow Shimazu samurai, the Ito were completely repelled, causing them to withdraw back into Hyuga. It was then that Yoshihiro charged out to strike at their rear with a force no larger than 300, completely surprising the Ito and
it's a good number depending on which part of his story.
Shattering their resolve as his soldiers fought ferociously. With the Ito army in disarray, the Shimazu force completely destroyed and scattered them, crippling the Ito clan entirely. Yoshihiro's victory is often looked back on and regarded to as the Okahizama of Kyushu. As in the years to come, with the Ito clan's strength severely weakened, the Shimazu now stand ready to move into their territory and become a regional power once again. Around that same time, there were also stirrings on the island of Shikoku. For decades, the Ichijo clan had exerted their authority over the province of Tosa, ruling over many smaller families within the area, such as the Chosokabe, Motoyama, and Aki. Yet in recent years, the power of the Ichijo had waned, allowing their vassals to gain increased independence. Of the lesser families of Tosa, it would be the Chosokabe who would come to prosper the most.
I've heard the name,
Under the leadership of Chosokabe Motochika, they had engaged their rival, the Motoyama, dealing a devastating defeat to them in 1562 at the Battle of Asakura, after which the Motoyama would fall away and eventually capitulate to the Chosokabe roughly 6 years later. Motochika's ambition was now on the rise. However, he needed to remain cautious of his Ichijo overlords, as he still wished to maintain the illusion that he was a loyal vassal.
Sure.
By 1569, he felt his power sufficient to bring down the only other strong family under the Ichijo, the Aki clan. Marching with a force of 7,000 men, he would crush the Aki and emerge as arguably the true might of Tosa, now appearing perhaps mightier than the Ichijo. Fate favored Motochika, as the daimyo of the Ichijo clan, Ichijo Kanesara, was somewhat unpopular among the samurai of Shikoku. Thus, many competent commanders had over time left his service for other lords. After steadily growing his own power and witnessing the slow decline of the Ichijo, by 1573, Motochika deemed the time right to take war to his former overlord, marching an army to seize their power base of Nakamura. Yet although the Chosokabe found victory taking the Ichijo headquarters, the war between the two families would still drag on for another 2 years. eventually culminating in 1575 at the Battle of Shimantogawa, where Motochika would call forth an increased amount of farmer samurai from the Tosa countryside. Using his increased numbers, Motochika fooled Ichijo Kanesara into believing a two-pronged attack was occurring, causing him to split his forces, when in reality, the Chosokabe army remained in bulk and easily crushed the separated groups of Ichijo soldiers. After this victory, the Ichijo were utterly defeated, and Tosa fell entirely to the Chosokabe. Just like the Shimazu in Kyushu, this position now put Motochika in a perfect spot to begin a campaign of conquest.
I mean, it won't have too much trouble with the one on the right, I guess what Kagawa is, since they're also like on the mainland fighting the Odas, so they're probably not too hard to take down, since they're also fighting the Oda, and that's probably taking most of their resources. The blue one above them, I don't know though.
For the island of Shikoku. So, what?
Okay, well, another clan rising from the bottom and getting to the top again. It's a kind of crazy time of meritocracy. I mean,
what can we learn?
The warring states, right? Good stuff. Next episode, what happens?
In the last
What happens? Nagashino.
In 1575, the war between the Oda and Takeda had been raging for roughly 2 years. Yet both sides had suffered setbacks. For the Oda, the situation around Kyoto had caused Oda Nobunaga's attention to drift off of the Takeda threat and onto more pressing matters. For he was still deep in a war against the Iko-Iki, and had only recently been able to overcome his Azai and Asakura enemies.
Yeah.
For the Takeda clan, it had been the death of their great leader, Takeda Shingen, in 1573, whose untimely passing had briefly halted their advance. Yet the new leader of the Takeda clan, Takeda Katsuyori, had eventually continued his father's conquest, as by 1574 he began pressing on the Oda again, capturing the Oda castle of Akichi in Mino, and the Tokugawa castle of Taketinjin in Totomi. It was clear that soon the Takeda would attempt another advance on the capital. However, Katsuyori still needed to deal with that same thorn in his side his father had had before him, that thorn being the Tokugawa clan. For a time now, it had been a matter of debate just how the Takeda should deal with the Tokugawa. On one hand, they weren't seen relatively as mighty, thus they could potentially be bypassed while token Takeda armies stayed behind to hold them down. On the other hand, they were definitely seen as bold and crafty, thus one could never count on everything going according to plan when dealing with them. This lesson had been learned in 1573 during the conflict at Mikatagahara, when Shingen was still leading the Takeda on their campaign.
Yeah, that was quite a move.
Daimyo Tokugawa Ieyasu was one of Nobunaga's most vital allies, being a key player on the border to the eastern provinces, and whose own territory covered a significant portion of the important Tokaido Road, which led to Kyoto, a road which Katsuyori would need in order to march his armies all the way to the capital. In 1575, Katsuyori was offered a substantial chance at crippling the Tokugawa when a traitor began conspiring with the Takeda, offering to open the gates to Ieyasu's capital at Okazaki. This would allow Katsuyori to easily storm it and shatter the Tokugawa.
A trick?
Although much of the Takeda forces were spread out along their territory, securing their borders, Katsuyori would set out at the head of an army numbering around 15,000, a third of the Takeda overall strength, with which he then began his march down into Tokugawa territory. However, while en route, the Tokugawa traitor had been exposed and dealt with. Thus, the Takeda would face a much tougher obstacle at Okazaki than anticipated. Not wishing to be bogged down in a long drawn-out siege of Ieyasu's capital, Katsuyori instead decided to simply bypass the position and move down south to lay siege to Yoshida Castle. While en route, Takeda forces would burn down several minor Tokugawa forts at Nirengi and Ushikubo. Yet Ieyasu, who himself had been positioned at his castle of Hamamatsu, had anticipated this and had reinforced Yoshida with another 6,000 men. Katsuyori was once again at a loss, not wishing to be held up by a major siege. However, when Tokugawa troops began pouring out of Yoshida to...
I'm actually surprised there was still so much men to be found. I thought they had lost so much against that big battle with Shingen, but maybe the Oda sent some reinforcements.
face the Takeda, Katsuyori quickly ordered his vanguard to charge in with the intent of crushing them, just like the Takeda had done at Mikatagahara when Ieyasu had sallied forth. Leading the Takeda vanguard was the prominent samurai Yamagata Masakage. For a while, the Takeda vanguard clashed with the Tokugawa forces outside of Yoshida. Yet quickly, it became clear this was all meant as show, as the real bulk of the Tokugawa forces stayed inside the castle. Instead, once the skirmish was done, both sides fell back. Yoshida would remain a heavily manned obstacle. There would be no decisive Takeda victory like there was at Mikatagahara. Thus, Katsuyori instead opted to leave Yoshida behind as well and advance further along the Toyokawa River, up to the small castle of Nagashino, which was only manned by 500 men.
To be honest, that's literally how I play Mountain Blade. Once you reach the point where you start conquering castles, you basically go close to a castle to check how many men there is, and if there's too much that you know you're gonna lose too many men, you just go try to find another castle that doesn't have much of a garrison. That's kind of how I play it. So he's kind of doing that, yeah.
Believing he could quickly storm and seize the minor fortification, Katsuyori ordered a full attack. Yet still, even with their low numbers, the defenders of Nagashino were able to repel every attempt by Katsuyori to storm the keep, holding off repeated Takeda assaults over 4 days. And although the Takeda were unable to seize the castle, they were successful in destroying the castle's storehouse, thus allowing Takeda forces to starve out the defenders of Nagashino. However, this put Katsuyori in the position he had been trying to avoid all along, entrenching himself into perhaps a long drawn-out siege. Still, Katsuyori was somewhat optimistic, given the fact that the storehouse was destroyed. This may allow for a swifter victory.
I mean, yeah, it won't be long if they have no food. It will be like, I don't know, 2-3 weeks max.
Facing slaughter at the hands of the Takeda at Nagashino, a brave Tokugawa samurai named Tori Tsuneeman decided to take on a dangerous mission. Carefully, he snuck out of the castle and passed through the Takeda siege lines, after which he lit a beacon to signal to the castle that he had safely made it through. He then with haste rushed towards Okazaki to deliver word of the situation. At Okazaki, Nobunaga had arrived at the head of a grand force numbering around 30,000, already twice that of the Takeda. He and Ieyasu had been held up in Okazaki, planning out their next course of action against the Takeda. Upon hearing word from Nagashino, Nobunaga and Ieyasu promised that aid was on the way. Thus, with good news in hand, Nobunaga and
Look at that guy on the right.
Ieyasu promised that aid was on the way. Thus, with good news in hand, Tori Tsuneeman began the arduous journey back into the besieged castle.
He's coming back in.
The encouraging news that help was coming. Unfortunately, Tsuneeman wouldn't have the same luck he did when he first made his way through the siege lines and was captured by the Takeda while trying to sneak back in. Upon hearing his story, Katsuyori was amazed at his bravery and offered Tsuneeman a deal in exchange for his life, and perhaps even new employment within the Takeda ranks. A deal Tsuneeman would eventually give in to.
Really?
He would be brought before the castle walls and made to lie to the defenders, telling them that no help was coming. This was an effort to cause them to lose hope and surrender. Thus, surrounded by Takeda soldiers, Tsuneeman was led before Nagashino Castle.
I mean, if I'm someone on the inside, I don't know if I believe it, right? Like, the enemy captured this guy and they're bringing him to say that. That seems kind of like an obvious lie.
And prompted to yell his false information. Instead, he did the opposite, crying out that Oda and Takeda armies were on
Let's go, what a Chad.
their way. For this, he was then crucified by the Takeda.
Well, at least he was a cool guy.
Now in a tough spot, with the Oda and Tokugawa armies heading to face him at Nagashino, Katsuyori held a war council with his top generals. The older of the bunch, veterans who had loyally served Shingen, such as Baba Nobuharu, Naito Masatoyo, and Yamagata Masakage.
I mean, you need to run. It's like if you stay, you're gonna get destroyed.
Each urged Katsuyori to withdraw back to Kai province, knowing that the combined might of Nobunaga and Ieyasu could not be defeated here. However, younger commanders such as Atobe Katsusuke argued that it would be cowardly to retreat, and that the Takeda had a long history of always achieving victory.
Yeah, with strategy. I mean, Shingen was like totally willing to retreat. Huh? Have you forgotten, like, you know, the battles against the Uesugi, just the back and forth, the outmaneuvering? Like, Shingen wasn't a fool who just always charged into battle. He used strategy, which means retreating and coming back to fight another day.
Was this mindset Katsuyori was no doubt swayed by.
Ah, damn. That's stupid.
On top of that, this campaign
Like, why would you listen to this guy? Just look at what your dad did. Like, the reason he was so good is because he was more flexible than just fighting for honor. He used strategy, which involved retreating and coming back.
needed a victory. So far, it had amounted to roughly be a complete failure. There needed to be something that made it all worthwhile. And this went hand in hand with the fact that he was still somewhat unproven as a daimyo, and a major victory here would go far to build his reputation and showcase his capability.
I mean, if he has a strategy, I guess, but, you know. I mean, we've seen crazy battles so far where, like, even Nobunaga himself, I mean, he won a battle where he was outnumbered many times, so it's not impossible, but, yeah.
Thus, Katsuyori emerged from the War Council determined to stand his ground and face the Oda Tokugawa forces here. To this end, Baba Nobuharu suggested that if Katsuyori really wished to do battle at Nagashino, it should be done from within the castle, meaning that Takeda forces should attempt one last all-out assault of the fortress in attempt to take it before their enemies arrived.
I mean, it still seems like not the best move because then you're stuck inside the castle in the middle of enemy territory. I don't know.
If Nagashino could be captured, the Takeda could use it to mount a determined defensive effort against the large numbers of the Oda and Tokugawa. Yet, once again, Katsuyori would dismiss the advice from his senior advisors and instead decide to face the enemy in the open.
I mean, I still don't think it's a great move to be inside the castle, but it's still better than facing them in the open.
Where the famed Takeda cavalry could truly shine. Believing this to be somewhat suicidal, the elder Takeda generals came together and shared a final cup of sake on the eve of battle. On the night of June 27th, the Oda and Tokugawa forces arrived several kilometers west of Nagashino, on the plain known as Shidarahara, boasting a combined army numbering around 38,000, more than twice that of the Takeda. The position they took was one Nobunaga believed would be perfect for arranging his forces without interruption. The main threat on the minds of Ieyasu and Nobunaga was no doubt the fearsome Takeda cavalry, which just 2 years prior had completely shattered the Tokugawa and Oda forces at Mikatagahara. This had caused Nobunaga to begin speculating on successful methods of stopping the devastating cavalry attack.
I mean, pike unit, just pike unit.
Now, it's quite clear that Nobunaga had been an ardent practitioner of Western firearms. However, since their introduction into Japan in 1543, it had always been a large debate on how to best implement them. The greatest usage of them had been defensively, and no one had excelled at this better than the Iko-Iki, who had used them spectacularly in holding off the Oda while they were besieged at Ishiyama.
Oh, is it gonna create, like, you know, wooden screen with, like, openings for the gunners, but the cavalry won't charge, just like a wooden wall kind of thing?
And Nagashima. This may have had an impact on Nobunaga, who now believed the best method for halting the Takeda cavalry would be to use firearms in mass. Thus, he would deploy the largest concentration of firearms Japan had ever seen. He positioned his forces in a line along the hills of Shidarahara and called forth a large quantity of timber he brought with him so that it could be fashioned into palisades. On the opposite side, Katsuyori began a final war council, where he broke his army apart in preparation for the next day's attack. The Takeda forces would be split 5 ways, 3,000 would stay behind to maintain the siege of Nagashino, while the other 4 groups would take part in the attack. Leading the offensive, we can see 3 prominent figures, the same senior retainers who had previously spoken out against this battle. They were arranged as follows. There'd be a left group under the command of Yamagata Masakage, a center group under Naito Masatoyo, a right group under Baba Nobuharu, and a rear headquarters where Katsuyori would establish himself. Back in the Oda Tokugawa camp, a Tokugawa retainer named Sakai Tadetsugu convinced Nobunaga to allow him to lead a raid against the Takeda siege lines at Nagashino. Thus, Nobunaga placed 3,000 men under his command, and quietly he crept off around the Takeda forces to set up position near Nagashino, waiting for the morning. As the dawn began to sweep over the land on June 28th, Nobunaga positioned 3,000 of his own gunners along the palisade line. The gunners were arranged 3 ranks deep and would rotate and reload as they fired. They were broken into groups led by Nobunaga's Horoshu, his personal bodyguard, who also served as his finest and most loyal samurai. This goes to show the level of discipline Nobunaga wished his battle line to possess. At 6 a.m., Katsuyori ordered his attack to commence.
This is going to be a massacre.
3 vanguard cavalry units under the command of Yamagata Masakage, Naito Masatoyo, and Baba Nobuharu charged forth with incredible momentum.
Like, I feel especially bad for like those old commanders who were under Shingen. I mean, I'm sure like, you know, they're loyal, so they're gonna do it, but you know, they know that if they were under Shingen, they wouldn't do something so stupid. Yeah, like, seriously.
The only initial hindrance was the shallow water of the Rengogawa, which the cavalry had to cross. However, it was then that the horsemen began to enter within 50 meters of the Oda lines, and the order was given.
50 meters is literally like, I figured that myself playing Mountain Blade, yeah, like, yeah, you kind of want to hold fire until about 50 meters because farther than that you're not hitting much, yeah.
Open fire. This was considerably very close in terms of matchlock guns. The initial wave of bullets was expected. However, what was not expected was the quick second round, followed by a swift third. A hail of gunfire quickly cut the cavalry charge into pieces. Any riders who made it through were met by Oda samurai and Ashigaru, who quickly surrounded and killed any stragglers. However, the Takeda would persist, and after 2 hours of battle raging on the field at Shidarahara, at around 8 a.m., Sakai Tadetsugu launched his rear assault on the Takeda siege line at Nagashino Castle. He broke his strike force into 3 groups and began simultaneous raids on Takeda positions. In the chaos of the fighting, seeing that a relief effort had arrived, the weathered Tokugawa defenders of Nagashino sallied out from their castle and joined the fray.
From behind them.
By 9 a.m., back in Shidarahara, the situation was still developing. In the center, the group led by Naito Masatoyo had completely stalled out, as successive waves of cavalry were unable to make a dent in Oda positions. On the right flank,
must have been such a shock. I mean, obviously they were like, you know, they were already used to much like guns at this point, you know, but they hadn't seen like this kind of use of it, right? And that's really something. It reminds me of when Napoleon goes to Egypt, and you know, the Ottoman Empire. I mean, they weren't like big users of guns, but I'm sure they had seen them. But you know, the actual like European style of line infantry squares, you know, and the perfect like combined firepower of a line of musket fire, you know, just decimating cavalry charge, and yeah, it's the kind of thing where like, you know it exists, this kind of gun, but you've never seen it used to the most effectiveness that it can be. It's really something, yeah. It's really something.
The forces led by Baba Nobuharu were also facing difficulties and were forced to fall back. However, while Nobuharu withdrew to rest his men, a Takeda relief force under the command of the Sanada brothers, Sanada Nobutsuna and Sanada Nobuteru, arrived. Nobutsuna and Nobuteru were sons of the late Sanada Yukitaka, a prominent lord from Shinano and senior Takeda retainer.
I've played some of Samurai Warriors Spirit of Sanada, one of the spin-off. I've played some of it, yeah.
A third and younger Sanada brother, Sanada Masayuki, was also present at Nagashino, but was
Not
now
that I remember
separated
the
fighting.
story.
The relief force under the command of Sanada Nobutsuna and Nobuteru pressed forth with ferocity and smashed through the Oda lines. This put them in close combat with forces under the command of Shibata Katsuie and Hashiba Hideyoshi. And
Well,
after
you're
a
doomed.
brutal struggle, both Sanada brothers were eventually slain.
You're doomed.
Nobuharu would follow this up with another assault, but would once again be repelled. On the left side, Yamagata Masakage also had seen some success breaking through, as he led his troops through a hail of bullets and into fierce melee combat against the Oda Tokugawa line, as he pressed forth to engage Honda Tadakatsu. And as his forces continued to break through to engage in an intense up-close struggle, Masakage would eventually be shot off of his horse and decapitated by nearby hostile samurai.
Damn.
With things looking increasingly grim, Katsuyori ordered a general charge of all remaining Takeda units, as even he himself, along with his personal bodyguard, entered the fight. Unfortunately, it did little to change the situation, and the battle would rage on until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Around then, Oda Nobunaga ordered his forces to pull back. As he did so, the Takeda army seized the opportunity and began a
It's a trap. I mean, why would he pull back when he's winning so much?
full retreat. Upon seeing this, Nobunaga changed his command and ordered his forces to pursue the fleeing Takeda. As Oda and Tokugawa forces rushed back over the field, Naito Masatoyo was overcome and gunned down. Another major Takeda figure to be slain was Baba Nobuharu, as he
Baba
took the
too.
wall of the rear guard covering Katsuyori's retreat. He would stand his ground against incoming enemy samurai
What a mess.
who fought him to the death. After 8 hours of intense struggle, the Battle of Nagashino came to a close. In the end, the Takeda army lost around 10,000 men.
I mean, even without the great strategy from Nobunaga's side with the palisade and the 3 lines of Teppo gunner, you know, it was doomed. I mean, maybe it would have been closer, but it was doomed.
Including many senior retainers and prominent generals. On the Oda Tokugawa side, the casualties amounted to roughly 6,000. A hefty loss of life, but nowhere
Still
near
nuts.
as significant as the tragic losses inflicted upon the Takeda. Katsuyori would return to Kai and never set out on another offensive. The Takeda were effectively crippled. One can only speculate how the situation could have been different had Katsuyori had heeded the advice of his senior officers.
I mean, I still don't think, you know, like, the actual good move would have been to pull back to his own power base, right? I still think that if he had, like, gotten into the castle and let himself be besieged, I mean, like, especially if he got into the castle with 15,000 men, like, it would have been starved pretty fast. So the only logical choice would have been to retreat back into his own power base, and then maybe he could amass a better army to face a potential, you know, Oda invasion. But yeah, he really made the wrong move.
A victory could have somehow been achieved by the Takeda. One can only wonder how Katsuyori could have gone on to impact Japan, as instead of taking a defensive position, he paid the ultimate price. Nobunaga was an experienced and crafty general. He knew how devastating the effects of firearms were, so much so that they could stop a large cavalry charge dead in its tracks. In a single battle, he displayed this and forever changed the implementation of firearms in Japan, as from this point on, they would begin to be utilized in massive firing lines, similarly to how they would be utilized in the West.
Yeah,
The age of the might of the Takeda was at an end, and with their defeat at Nagashino, Nobunaga was now free to continue.
it's really the classic story of, you know, great leader, but the successor son is just not up to it. You know, it's, I mean, just in this History of Japan series I've been doing on this channel, we've seen this quite a lot of time with the emperors early on, right? I mean, so many times, you know, great emperor, but then whoever is following, be it a son or family or whatever, they're just not up to the task, and they kind of fuck everything up. And sometimes it lasts for a few generations until you finally get a great guy again. That's kind of how it ends up being, you know. It's kind of how it ends up being.
to his grand campaign for control of the land. So,
Man, great episode. This battle was crazy. this battle was really crazy. I wonder if there's any... there must be some depiction in like the game Samurai Warriors. I wonder if there's any anime or anything about this. Maybe some manga. I don't know. Great stuff, great stuff. That was maybe one of the best episodes. Really enjoyed this one. But again, I do feel kind of sad, because obviously Takeda used to do so great, and yeah, it ends up like this. It is what it is. Anyway, I'll take a quick break before we continue. Give me 5 minutes. I shall be back. Alright, sorry for the wait, though I think it was pretty expedient. I am back and ready to continue. Really great stuff. I mean, we're in the thick of all of it, and it's just mighty interesting. Okay. So yeah, next episode. Tedoligawa, Kenshin's final achievement. Man, Kenshin hasn't really been doing much since the fight with the Takeda. I guess let's see what happens.
After his victory against the Takeda in 1575, Oda Nobunaga was essentially tying up loose ends, most notably through the recapture of castles in Mino that had been seized by the Takeda. With the defeat of Takeda Katsuyori at Nagashino, he was now safe to reshift his focus back to the capture of the formidable Ikoiki temple fortress of Ishiyama Honganji. For 5 years now, the Oda had been attempting to crush the monks of Ishiyama, yet after countless attempts, the monks still appeared resilient as ever.
That's crazy.
By April of 1576, the Oda retainer Akichi Mitsuhide, who had been the main general in charge of the siege, launched a new offensive. Yet, once again, the attacks were driven off, and the mighty temple fortress remained secure.
I still don't understand why you can't starve the place. There must be something to it, otherwise, obviously, they would do it, right? Like, But at this point, you know, it seems like it would make the most sense if you just can't win with frontal assault, just starve the place. But what could be stopping them from starving the place? I mean, it doesn't seem to have like it's back to the sea where they can reinforce it with boats or something. I don't get it. I don't get it. I really feel like I need to look up more about this one.
Nobunaga had Ishiyama surrounded, both on land and by blockade at sea.
Oh, well. So it is. It's back east to the sea, but it's still surrounded, so I don't get it. How are you not starving it?
Even if his armies could not seize it, he was still confident that within time it would still fall due to a lack of incoming supplies. However, this is where the mighty Mori clan of the West finally enters the picture.
Oh shit.
Previously, before he was stripped of power, Shogun Ashikaga Yoshiaki had
But the Mori lost their great leader, so it might be the same as the Takeda, right? The leader right now might not be, you know, good enough for facing Nobunaga.
attempted to get the Mori to attack the Oda. Yet Daimyo Mori Tiramoto had instead opted to wait, most likely due to external factors. Although now, Teramoto was finally ready to enter the fray. By August, using the powerful Mori Navy, he plowed through the Oda blockade at the first sea battle of Kizugawaguchi and began supporting the Iko-Iki directly. Ishiyama would not fall anytime soon, and now Nobunaga had another major enemy to contend with.
It's really endless. I mean, his goal is to conquer Japan, so I guess he should expect this, but man. And you know, to be honest, the Takeda are still not fully defeated either. And they might get a new leader who's actually competent, so they are still kind of a big threat, yeah.
Had the Mori and Iko-Iki been the only concerns facing Nobunaga, that would have been one thing. Yet,
Oh, they're watching a sumo match. Was Nobunaga a fan of sumo? Interesting. Interesting.
as he was soon to find out, he was far more vulnerable. That same year, just to the north, the Uesugi were on the march. Hojo Ujiyasu, the balance of power in the east, had collapsed. Believing the opportunity to be right, the famed Uesugi Kenshin had began to expand his territory west of his home province of Echigo. Previously, Kenshin had secured all of Eichu, and by 1577, when civil war in Noto erupted within the Hatakeyama clan, Kenshin was quick to invade, taking the province for himself.
Easy.
Following this, Kenshin began pressing into Kaga, which was for the most part dominated by the Iko-Iki. Nevertheless, he was quickly coming to the border of Oda territory. Kenshin was no friend to Nobunaga.
Which you would think they would be, because again, they both hate the Etoiki, they both fight the Takeda, so for now at least, you know, I would have seen an alliance coming, but I guess not.
In fact, the two powerful warlords could indeed be seen as enemies. Kenshin had never shown the drive to seize the capital that Shingen and Nobunaga had possessed, but now, with his territory growing closer to Kyoto, it was becoming more and more of a possibility that he could lead his army into the capital if he so desired. And of course, Nobunaga had every right to fear Kenshin doing so. In fact, by 1577, he was already considered somewhat of a legend. He had proven himself to be one of the greatest lords in the East, having halted Shingen at Kawanakajima and led successful campaigns into Kanto against the Hojo. Nobunaga needed to act quickly if he was to effectively respond to the Uesugi expansion. He gathered an army and set out to link up with forces under Shibata Katsuie and Maeda Toshie, who had already began to march into Kenshin's territory. Upon seeing the strength of the Uesugi fortified position in Noto, they pulled back into Echizen, where they converged with Nobunaga. Together, their army numbered around 50,000.
Man, the numbers are growing and growing, but I guess it does need that to fight the Uesugi. Fair enough. I mean, I guess Kenshin is kind of like the last big name enemy that Nobunaga has right now. Yeah.
Opposite to them, Kenshin gathered a force around 30,000 and positioned himself at Matuo Castle, near the Tedori River in Kaga Province. Nobunaga amassed his soldiers across from Kenshin, once again with large numbers of matchlock tipo and supposedly even cannons. No doubt, Nobunaga wished to deter Kenshin from holding out, showcasing that his forces were well equipped to deal with the Uesugi forces at range. he may have even hoped that Kenshin would simply pull back. Instead, Kenshin would showcase his fine-tuned strategic genius. Purposefully weakening his defensive line, Kenshin ordered a detachment of his samurai to begin making their way further up along the Teidorigawa. And for once, Nobunaga took the bait, believing that it was a perfect opportunity to sweep across the river and smash the Uesugi army while it was divided. He quickly ordered Shibata Katsuie to launch a full assault of Matsuo Castle. Yet, as Oda forces began to cross through the water, Kenshin sprung his trap, signaling his men to break the floodgates along the river, thereby releasing massive waves that carried away whole portions of the Oda army. Those that did manage to make it across to the opposite bank were immediately engaged by Uesugi samurai, who easily cut down the rattled Oda soldiers.
Damn, a floodgate strategy, that's not too often you see that.
As heavy casualties began to mount, Nobunaga quickly lost his nerve and ordered a full retreat back south towards Omi, in fear that Kenshin was going to swiftly continue the momentum and march directly on Kyoto.
I mean, less is normal. Be smart, right? I mean, again, you know, like clearly you've been outsmarted at this point, so you know, cut your loss and come back to fight another day, which is what the Takeda should have done last episode.
Caused a genuine crisis in the Oda camp as Nobunaga went into a great state of shock at the defeat of his massive northern army. However, in the aftermath, we can see that Kenshin may not have been so eager to march on the capital after all, as instead of pressing deeper into the region, he pulled back into Noto after his victory. Kenshin would go on to use the influence he earned through defeating the Oda to further solidify his power over his newly acquired territory. In the end, the Battle of Teidorigawa would go down as Kenshin's final major engagement, as just a year later in 1578, he would pass away, most likely due to his alcoholic tendencies.
Okay.
This leaves many to...
Man, all the legend going down, huh?
Speculate that had Kenshin continued his advance or even began his campaign sooner, he may have very likely succeeded in capturing Kyoto and defeating the Oda.
I mean, totally, if he had started at the same time as the Oda were fighting like the Azai, the Takeda, you know, if Kenshin had joined at that time, I think the Oda would be done. That would have been way too much. Huh? But yeah, the point is that his enemies just keep coming one by one, more or less. And it gives him time to defeat them one by one.
Instead, the battle became a cruel reminder for Nobunaga that he was not invincible. Personally, I find the Battle of Teidorigawa to be incredibly interesting, as although Takeda Shingen did not get a chance to formally face Oda Nobunaga on the battlefield, his old rival Uesugi Kenshin did, giving us but a taste of what we might have seen. Would Shingen have had the chance?
I believe it again. I totally believe Shingen would have done so much better against Oda, but I still don't think he would have fully won, but he would have done so much better than his own son.
So, what?
The inbred bastard, right? Okay, well, good stuff, Kenshin. Good stuff. Huh? I mean, to be honest, he was chilling for a long time. Huh? Well, chilling. He took, you know, a bit more territory, but like weaker territory, right? But since the stuff with Takeda Shingen, yeah, he wasn't really involved in much more massive conflict. Huh? He was mostly just chilling. Huh? Yeah. Again, the big what if is what if he would have attacked around the time the Takeda attacked? Huh? You know. Yeah, what if? Episode 30, the Western campaigns.
In the last of Uesugi. After his surprising defeat at the hands of Uesugi Kenshin at Teidorigawa, Oda Nobunaga had lost a bit of his composure. By 1577, his enemies were now the Mori, Ikuiki, and Uesugi. Although, because Kenshin opted to pull back after his victory at Teidorigawa, the Uesugi weren't seen as high a threat as they initially were. Even then, Shibata Katsuie and Maeda Toshie both continued to put pressure on the Uesugi. Nevertheless, Nobunaga was becoming surrounded once again, and what must have further rattled him was when, in the immediate aftermath of his loss at Teidorigawa, the devious Matsudaira Hizehime betrayed him. If we remember all the way back to episode 20, Hisahide, who had been a Miyoshi retainer who broke off to form his own clan, was instrumental in the assassination of the previous shogun, Ashikaga Yoshiteru. Later, under the pressure of the mighty Oda clan, he would have no choice other than to swear loyalty to Nobunaga. However, as early as 1573, he was already trying to break away from Nobunaga, yet he wouldn't formally do so until 1577. Recalling his forces which were aiding in the siege of Ishiyama Honganji, he bolstered his position in Yamato and hoped that the Tsutsui clan would join him as well. Okay. Unfortunately, he had miscalculated the loyalty of the Tsutsui, as they did not join him and instead continued to back the Oda. As Oda armies began to surround his castle of Shigisan, he learned the only things Nobunaga desired from him now were his head and his coveted Hiragumo teapot. Okay. In an act of final defiance, he thoroughly smashed his teapot before killing himself. And according to legend, he may have even sought to deprive Nobunaga further by supposedly even ordering his soldiers to blow up his head after his death. Whatever the case, a great villain of the Sengoku period, was dead.
Was he really a great villain? I mean, I guess there's probably much more to him that wasn't talked about, you know, as in-depth as this series. I'm sure like there's so many more people that we could get in-depth video about this guy included, because my only impression of him is like he makes funny face and he fucked up his coup d'etat or whatever and just killed himself. That's it. He doesn't seem to have done much more. It's my impression of him.
And with his death, Nobunaga was free to resume action against more serious threats.
Who's gonna betray him next?
As we saw in the previous episode, the Mori were already lending aid to the Iko-Iki, and it may have only been a matter of time before Mori armies began marching east again.
But the Mori have a lot of territory to cover, and they would have to pass through other clans' territory, so that seems complicated.
Against the Oda. Nobunaga had anticipated going to war with the Mori. In fact, he had begun his preparations to do so as early as 1575. However, the true problem in facing the Mori is that you aren't only going to war with an incredibly powerful clan, but also a host of minor allied clans. The Mori's sphere of influence was comparable in size to Nobunaga's. We can see the clans that were allied or rather friendly to the Mori include the Kono, the Okita, the Amana, the Akamatsu.
Okay, so yeah. So the Mori don't have to conquer this clan along the way, they're friendly. I see. I was really wondering about this little patch of clan. Yamana, Okita, Akamatsu.
The Ashiki and the Hatano. As I have said before, and continue to say, the Mori owned the West, as the entire Chugoku region.
But again, this guy has not proven himself yet. He succeeded his amazing dad, but, you know, he might also be a fuck-up. I mean, he might not be an inbred bastard, but let's see how good he is, though. Like, this is the thing.
Was in the grip of daimyo Mori Terumoto. To this end, Nobunaga devised a plan using two of his most trusted generals, Hashiba Hideyoshi and Akechi Mitsuhide. Hideyoshi was to lead a campaign along the Sanyoro Road on the Inland Sea, working his way towards the Mori power base in Aki province. Mitsuhide had an upper route, leading his armies along the Sanindo Road on the coast of the Sea of Japan, striking out at Mori allies before making headway into Mori territory. In 1577, the campaigns began, and immediately we can see differentiation in progress. Mitsuhide was quick to run into difficulties. Not only did he disagree with orders given to him by Nobunaga, but also the resistance he faced was fierce. Although he had previously been in charge of the siege of Ishiyama Honganji, it appears his general approach to siege work had been somewhat lackluster, as his sieges were continually bogged down and hindering his progress along the coast.
I mean, in what we've seen so far, everybody struggled with siege. Like, there's just something about Japanese castle that seem, you know, especially designed to be really a big pain in the ass. Yeah.
On the other side, Hideyoshi was thriving, making slow but obvious gains through Harima. After marching his armies through the territory of the Oda-allied Beisho clan of Harima, his first obstacle was none other than the castle that would one day be known as Himeji. Yet, at this point, it
About
was
the
known
name?
as Himeyama. As we have seen in previous episodes, Hideyoshi was a master at taking castles, and once
Yeah.
again, at Himeyama, he would use cunning to seize the fortification through diplomacy. By working with the governor of Himeyama, a samurai named Kodera Masamoto, and a mediator.
Japanese didn't have good artillery, that's why. I mean, fair enough. But it's also like the defense in depth system where, like, you know, they have like multiple gates and sections of the castle, which you have to take one by one rather than like once you've breached the walls, you can get into the full castle, basically. I think that's the biggest difference.
Named Kuroda Yoshitaka, they were able to turn the castle over to Hideyoshi, as well as sway other smaller families in the province to back the Oda.
Okay.
Moving further along, he would later lay siege to Kozuki Castle. At first, having superior numbers, Hideyoshi simply demanded surrender. When the defenders turned the offer down, Oda forces went about destroying Kozuki's outer defenses and pressed forth with a strangling siege. In attempts to dislodge Hideyoshi, the Ukita clan sent a relief force to aid the defenders of Kozuki. Yet they would be intercepted by another Oda army and driven off.
Well,
With the relief force dealt with, Hideyoshi once again demanded surrender, although it was still rejected. Finally, he ordered an all-out assault, and after incurring massive casualties, Oda forces finally succeeded. Yet, even then, Kozuki would remain a hotly contested castle. In the coming years, it would be continually taken and retaken by the opposing forces.
I see.
However, by 1578, a problem to Hideyoshi's rear would emerge. The daimyo of the Beisho clan, Beisho Nagaharu, had been displeased with Nobunaga having chosen Hideyoshi to lead this offensive against the Mori. Nagaharu thought little of Hideyoshi, who he considered to be nothing more than a low-born peasant. When the Oda
Classic.
retainer Araki Murashige of Setsu province
Like, seriously, some people are just so fucking stupid. Like, Hideyoshi has proven himself so many times with, you know, like, legendary battle strategies and things like that. But the guy is still, like, saying, you're a stupid low-born peasant. You know, what have you done? Like, you've got great blood, but you've done nothing. Like, you're trash. Seriously. Some people's mind is really just broken.
rebelled against Nobunaga in favor of the Mori. Beisho Nagaharu did the same, and his power base of Miki Castle became a Mori-allied stronghold, providing fresh aid to Ishiyama. Immediately, Hideyoshi and his forces doubled back to begin a new siege against Miki. Although, with the Mori supplying the Beisho from the sea, the castle was bound to hold out. Later that year, Oda naval forces under Kuki Yoshitaka, who had previously been in charge of the blockade of Ishiyama, returned to strike back at the Mori navy in what would be the second sea battle of Kizugawaguchi. This time, within his navy,
Man,
Yoshitaka
look at this
brought-
design. Not a fun you see ship like this. I don't know if I've really seen battles with ship like this in games. Obviously it's built, you know, with a little opening for the guns, right? But man, it's a weird one.
with him 6 newly constructed O-Adakebune battleships, armored with iron plating and carrying cannons. It seemed to be the edge the Oda Navy needed, as they were able to beat back the 600 ships of the Mori and resume
600.
the blockade of Ishiyama and now Miki. Back on the Sanindo route, Mitsuhide was dealing with a situation in Tanba province. His army had surrounded the Hatano power base of Yakami. Yet, in effort to reduce casualties, he was trying to get Daimyo Hatano
In Totawa, a Bune.
Hideharu to surrender peacefully. What happened next is somewhat up to debate by historians if it really did happen. Supposedly, as a bargaining chip for surrender, Mitsuhide offered his mother over as a hostage for the Hatano in exchange
Okay.
for Hideharu's surrender. Eventually, he agreed. Mitsuhide promised that Hideharu would keep his life, and he'd be sent to Nobunaga's Azuchi Castle. A year later, in 1579,
Floating castle, yeah. Clearly it's not to go into the open ocean, it's only for the coast.
Mitsuhide was working against the Ishiki clan of Tango province alongside allied Hosokawa forces. they would eventually succeed in toppling the Ishiki. Yet soon, word would arrive from Azuchi. Atano Hideharu, who Mitsuhide had promised safety, was executed by the order of Nobunaga. Word of this soon reached the garrison at Yakami Castle as well, who still held loyalty
it's
to
good for
Hideharu.
operation? Really? It just looks like it's so top heavy that it would flip easily in any kind of rough wave, you know? Invade Korea. Okay.
Hide's mother, still there as a hostage, she was immediately brutally murdered at the hands of the former.
Okay, that's sad. Huh? I mean, I still would say, you know, don't choose your mom for a bargaining chip. But also, yeah, it's obviously kind of fucked up that Nobunaga executed the guy knowing that, you know, Mitsuhide was lose his mom. Or did not know, I guess. I don't know.
Atano Samurai. Things were already becoming tense between Nobunaga and
Mitsuhide.
Yet this would perhaps push matters over the edge. Public insults and disagreements on strategy were one thing, but knowingly allowing one's mother to be murdered was another.
So he knew. Okay.
Returning to Hideyoshi.
I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah. Again, they both fucked up, like Nobunaga doing it, and this guy using his mother as a bargaining chip. I mean, they both fucked up.
With Miki now cut off completely, Nagaharu would hold out until 1580, until inevitably agreeing to surrender the castle, essentially causing the whole of Harima to enter into Oda hands. With Mori forces being continually pushed back by the Oda, they were unable to help Ishiyama Honganji any further, as finally, in that same year, the mighty temple fortress would finally to Nobunaga, ending the decade-long siege that would...
I was literally about to say, it feels like it's been 10 years. It's been 10 years.
...go down in history as the Ishiyama Honganji War. By 1580, it had been 4 years since the beginning of the war between the Oda and Mori. And if one thing can be seen thus far, it is that, unlike the war with the Takeda, victory would not be decided by a single battle. Instead, Oda Nobunaga and Mori Terumoto were investing themselves into what would be a long, protracted conflict, where the winner would most likely have ultimate domination over the land.
It hasn't been addressed, but is there nothing going on in Northern Honshu? The green territory that we see, like, is there even any clan, or, you know, like, what is going on over there? It's still a lot of land, but I guess not important. You know, next to the Usugi and Ojo. But yeah, I guess that's true at this point. If either the Mori or the Oda wins, yeah. I mean, you could say Kyushu, but even Kyushu is too small to really resist. And Shikoku is, you know, only 2 clans, yeah.
So.
Okay, well, things are getting crazy. The Date clan in Northern Honshu. Yeah, I mean, so far they've really not done much. It seems like they're just chilling over there, yeah. Good for them, I guess. Good for them. Just
in the last
chilling,
episode,
yeah.
The last time we visited the island of Kyushu was in episode 27. In that video, we saw how the Shimazu clan had found renewed strength, leading to important triumphs and significant expansion. In particular, the 1572 Battle of Kizakihara, in which Shimazu Yoshihiro would crush a numerically superior Ito force. Kizakihara would later come to be nicknamed the Okehizama of Kyushu, due to how it completely altered the power balance of the island and left the Shimazu clan poised for further conquest. Over the next few years, with the Ito strength completely diminished, the Shimazu clan had slowly pushed up through their province of Hyuga. By 1576, the Ito would be defeated at Takabaru, an event which effectively put a nail in the coffin for their clan, as 1 year later, Daimyo Ito Yoshitsuke was forced to flee north into Bongo. With Shimazu influence swelling larger and larger, by 1578 the Shimazu would claim the whole of Hyuga, and also, around that same time, claim control over Higo after defeating the minor power of the Sagara clan. However, this would immediately lead to hostilities between them and the mighty Otomo clan. The Otomo have a long and storied history, over the centuries being a key player on the island of Kyushu. often clashing with other major clans in western Honshu. Otomo Sorin, a man who had embraced Christianity against the wishes of his wife at the time, was a competent leader who had cemented the strength of his clan in this warring age. Although we can see that a fair portion of the Otomo vassals weren't necessarily 100% under Sorin's thumb. Rather, they were almost their own daimyo clans that simply bore a loose allegiance to the Otomo. Fine examples being the Tachibana and Tamura families. This may have provided some sort of internal weakness festering within the Otomo clan. Another problem was no doubt the powerful Mori clan to the east, who had made it somewhat difficult for Sorin to ever truly expand. An example of this can be seen in 1568, when the Otomo had attempted to annex the province of Hizen, now under the rule of the Ryozoji clan. The Ryozoji had stolen power away from the Shoni roughly 15 years prior, and were now seen as a rising threat. When Otomo armies began marching against them, the Mori would send an expeditionary force to aid the Ryozoji, causing the Otomo effort to be for nothing. The Otomo would try to attack the Ryozoji yet again in 1570, but would still be repelled. Nevertheless, Otomo influence remained strong in northern Kyushu, and by 1576, Sorin handed leadership of the clan over to his son, Otomo Yoshimune. Of course, 2 years later, we saw how the Shimazu secured Hyuga, causing members of the Ito clan to flee into the arms of the Otomo.
I mean, if they continue, and conquer the Otomo, they might be pretty damn powerful, maybe as much as the Mori.
New might of the Shimazu was now the #1 threat to the Otomo. It was clear that the Shimazu were ever ambitious and would in time bring war to northern Kyushu.
I mean, yeah, if the Shimazu gets all of Kyushu, that's pretty damn good.
Thus, in effort to get a jump on their likely new enemy and reclaim Hyuga for the Ito clan, Otomo Yoshimune, along with his father, amassed a force numbering around 50,000 strong and marched south to take on the Shimazu.
That is a lot.
As the Otomo army pressed into Hyuga, they were quick to earn contempt from the common people, as due to Sorin's Christianity, he commanded his men to burn many Shinto and Buddhist sites along their warpath.
Stupid move. Stupid move.
The main bulk of the Otomo army under the command of Towara Chikataka would eventually lay siege to Taka Castle under the command of Shimazu Iehiza. Even though Iehiza was vastly outnumbered, he offered a determined defensive effort, holding off the Otomo forces while a relief force led by his brothers quickly rushed to his aid. The daimyo of the Shimazu clan, Shimazu Yoshihiza, would bring an army up to Sarawara, where he then would await Shimazu Yoshihiro, who was held up in battle against an advancing Otomo force. He would quickly rout the Otomo before burning their fort at Matsuyama. Eventually, the forces under Yoshihiza and Yoshihiro would link up and advance together against the Otomo main body at Taka. On December 10th, both armies would clash at Mimigawa. Towara Chikataka would lead the Otomo charge, plowing into the front Shimazu ranks, leading to a brutal and chaotic melee struggle. The Otomo army still vastly outnumbered the Shimazu, causing things to look dire for Yoshihiza.
But
then, from the rear, Iehiza's force from Taka Castle stormed out and would assault the Otomo from the...
That seems to happen quite a bit. That's probably like the biggest threat when you're doing a siege, is that, relief army appears, you fight the relief army, but then the one inside the castle come out and sandwich you. That's such a threat.
Rear. The Shimazu army now grew to around 30,000, which was still roughly 20,000 less than the Otomo. However, with the Otomo being attacked from two directions, panic began to spread. Soon, massive portions of the Otomo began to break and rout, eventually causing the entire Otomo force to disintegrate.
Wow.
The Shimazu had won the day.
That's a great victory.
This defeat would go on to cause a significant decline in the influence of the Otomo, while the Shimazu were now without a doubt a regional powerhouse. Seeing the weakening of the Otomo, the Ryozoji then took the opportunity to strike out against them, claiming Chigoku province in the disarray. Upon seeing how pitiful the situation had become for the Otomo, Shimazu Yoshihisa decided to offer a ceasefire to them, understanding that a more serious threat in Kyushu may in fact actually be the dangerous Ryozoji clan.
Are they really that
Of
dangerous?
course, the Shimazu weren't the only island clan making gains around that time. In Shikoku, Chosokabe Motochika was planning his next campaign. By 1575, Motochika had usurped the Ichijo clan and claimed Tosa for himself. Now his ambition was looking towards Iyo province, home to the Kono clan. The Kono were allies to the Mori, yet with the Mori currently battling against Nobunaga in Honshu, Motochika knew that they would not receive any form of proper aid to stop a determined Chosokabe assault. Beginning in 1579, a 7,000-man Chosokabe army under Hizataka Chikunobu besieged the Kono castle of Okayama. Unfortunately, the siege would amount to nothing, as during the initial fighting, Chikunobu would be shot dead, causing his army to rout. A year later, in 1580, after the previous year's test, Motochika committed his forces to a full invasion of the province, leading now 30,000 men against the Kono.
Man, they all managed to raise crazier and crazier army, I mean. And yet, the country has been at war for like so fucking long at this point. When we started, people were raising like a few thousand, you know, like 2,000-3,000 was a good army, I guess. But now it's like every clan is managing to raise like, you know, 20 to 50,000. It's crazy.
Just like he had figured, without the aid of the Mori,
Despite
the
all the
Kono
deaths
were
that already
powerless
happened.
to stop his advance, causing the Chosokabe to seize Iyo with somewhat little difficulty. Around that time, Motochika reached out to Oda Nobunaga, believing the two to have similar aims and also similar enemies. Motochika had just attacked an ally of the Mori clan.
I mean, that would be nice. Like, Nobunaga needs a friend at this point. Like, every clan always wants to fight him, so for once, he does need a friend. No? And having a friend against the Mori would be good right now. Yeah.
And reasonably figured that the Mori would now be hostile towards him. On top of this, he also held an ambition of uniting Shikoku under his banner. And to do this meant also going to war against the Miyoshi,
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
who still held considerable territory on the island. Both the Mori and Miyoshi were at war with the Oda. Thus, an alliance between the Oda and Chosokabe would make perfect sense. To this end, Nobunaga agreed to an alliance. However, privately, we can see that Nobunaga cared little for Motochika, and
I mean, sure, I'm sure. Like, it's still like a temporary alliance, obviously. We know eventually he wants everything.
actually planned to one day seize Shikoku for himself.
But yeah, the point is to unify all of Japan, so temporary alliance, sure, but yeah.
So, what
I'm sure the guy probably knows that. I mean, you know, it's a temporary alliance, and I guess he's hoping that by unifying Shikoku, he can get strong enough to hold it. You know, it's still an island, right? Okay, great stuff. Great stuff. Next episode. Wataten the Uesugi Civil War. Damn. I mean, I guess Kenshin is dead, so yeah, it's time. It's
divide
time.
into it? In the spring of 1578, the great lord of the Uesugi clan, Uesugi Kenshin, passed away.
Rest in
In
peace.
life, Kenshin had been a staple of power in the East, a man who had restored the might of the Uesugi, forging them into a counterbalance against the strength of other major Eastern clans, the Takeda and Hojo. He had come to clash with these two rivals many times throughout his tenure as leader of the Uesugi family, often defensively against the aggression of the Takeda clan under Takeda Shingen, and offensively against the Hojo of the Kanto region, where Kenshin believed he held true authority thanks to the title of the Kanto Kanrei that had been bestowed upon him. In his personal life, as we know very well, Kenshin had led a religious existence. To this end, he never married, and even may have went so far as to remain celibate. Thus, he never produced a true son to take leadership from him upon his death.
That is pretty bad. Yeah. Damn. You should have known that, you know, that's a problem. I mean, once he dies, everybody's gonna fight for power then.
However, that was not to say he did not name an heir.
Ah,
In fact, he may have named two.
Ah, okay, that's even
One was
worse.
Kenshin's son-in-law, whom Kenshin would adopt as his own, a man by the name of Uesugi Kagekatsu. The other was born of the Hojo clan. Back in 1569, after constant war between the Uesugi and Hojo, the two powers finally came to peace, cemented by an exchanging of hostages. It was here that a son of Hojo Ujiyasu was offered to Kenshin, a young man by the name of Hojo Saburo. Kenshin adopted Saburo, and in time we can even speculate that Kenshin took a liking to him, as he proved to be intelligent and competent, eventually even giving his own former name to him, as Saburo became Uesugi Kagetora. For a time, these two adopted sons flourished under Kenshin as the Uesugi armies pushed west, ultimately defeating Oda Nobunaga at Tedorigawa.
It's like, have you not learned anything? I mean, I'm always saying that in retrospect, but like, anytime you have two potential successors, like, things go to war like this. It's obvious. Before dying, he should have, like, really made a big deal of, like, the one that he absolutely chose.
In 1577. As we know, unfortunately 1 year later, at the height of his power, Kenshin would die. Prior to his passing, as he was feeling increasingly ill, he decided to write what we can consider a form of death poem. Even a lifelong prosperity is but one cup of sake. A life of 49 years is passed in a dream. I know not what life is, nor death. Year in, year out, all but a dream. Both heaven and hell are left behind. I stand in the moonlit dawn, free from clouds of attachment.
So, he's just saying that he doesn't actually care what happens after he dies. Fair enough, I guess, yeah. Not all rulers have to care about what happens afterward.
The man who had been the sole might of the Uesugi clan, much like Shingen had been to the Takeda, was gone. It is not entirely clear what Kenshin had envisioned for the future of the clan. Many believe that due to the unity of the family, he had wished for Kagekatsu and Kagetora to rule together as separate branches of the Uesugi, a union that would have kept the strength of the clan intact. However, ambition would lead to a shattering of whatever kinship remained between the two, as each sought to take the reins of the family for themselves and inherit the might of their father. Kagekatsu quickly established himself at Kenshin's former stronghold of Kasugeyama, while Kagetora moved to hold up at the fortress of Otate.
Not far.
Lines were being drawn in Echigo, causing a civil war to appear on the horizon, a conflict that would be remembered as the Otate no Ran. Although this would not simply be an internal affair within the province, the influence of the Uesugi was much too far-reaching and would come to draw in clans all around Echigo.
I mean, it's obvious that if there's civil war within the Uesugi and not Kenshin to defend the country anymore, the Takeda and the Hojo might, feel like an opportunity has come again.
In particular, the Hojo and Takeda would be directly affected by this development. Before Kenshin's death, these two clans had been at peace, yet a war over the future of the Uesugi would not be something overlooked by these two old rivals. The Hojo proved to have a strong claim in the conflict. Kagetora was of course Hojo-born. Thus, Daimyo Hojo Ujimasa was quick to dispatch aid to his former younger brother. If Kagetora could claim control over the Uesugi, it would go on to rein in a new position of power for the Hojo. This put him at odds with Takeda Katsuyori, still weak after his defeat at Nagashino. Katsuyori had already begun talks with Kagekatsu and eventually would form an alliance between the two, with Kagekatsu in time coming to marry Katsuyori's sister. An odd form of irony, as Shingen's own daughter would be married into the Uesugi family.
Okay.
With both the Hojo and Takeda backing different sides, their period of peace would come to an abrupt end, resulting in fresh conflicts between the two.
It was only a matter of time,
seen in a new round of fighting throughout Izu province, and later, Kozuke. The civil war itself would not last terribly long, and would end in roughly 1 year's time. While both Kagekatsu and Kagetora were able to amass sizable forces, ultimately, a larger portion of significant Uesugi commanders had flocked to join Kagekatsu.
Because, he's not Ojo, I assume.
After a series of bitter skirmishes, Kagekatsu would lay siege to Kagetora at Otate. The reinforcements sent to aid him by the Hojo had not arrived in time.
Damn.
Surrounded and outnumbered, Kagetora would first attempt to flee the province, before finally committing seppuku.
I do feel bad for a guy, sentenced on the stage, he'd managed to make quite a name for himself, adopted son to Kenshin, but I feel like he should have known that this wasn't going to work out. He was still Ojo, and yeah, I guess the rest of the Uesugi people probably, didn't forget that, right? Kenshin might have been nice on him, but yeah, no surprise there.
Thus, the clan fell into the hands of Kagekatsu. However, to call this a victory would be wrong, as it would go on to have drastic consequences for the Uesugi. In fact, all round, the situation proved to cause more strife for those affected. The Uesugi were weakened, and the Hojo and Takeda were both fighting each other in another meaningless conflict. If one victor...
It's a good thing for Nobunaga, yeah? Like, he can't just chill on the east side, since everybody's fighting over there, yeah? He can't just chill and focus on the Mori.
What can be seen, it would be no doubt the Oda clan. Due to the civil war in Echigo, easternmost Oda forces under the leadership of Shibata Katsuie and Maeda Toshie had seized the opportunity and pushed far into Uesugi territory. By 1581, the Oda war machine had smashed its way through Ikuiki and Uesugi resistance, seizing Kaga, Noto, and pummeling its way into Echu, where the Oda captured Toyama Castle. In a year's time.
What is this green part in the middle, like? Yeah. Is there actually a clan there?
The Oda would even seize Uozu from the Uesugi, effectively removing their influence from the province. In 1582, we can see that the Uesugi position had been reduced dramatically over a very short period of time. Not only did they lose all of their western holdings to the Oda, but also their territory in Kutsuke had been slowly eaten away as the Takeda and Hojo fought over what remained. With Kagekatsu still holding power over Echigo, the Uesugi would live on. However, civil war and the loss of their many provinces would put their days of being a regional contender at an end.
Yeah.
So, what can we learn?
They were definitely one of this clan that, a lot of the clan only worked because they had like a really strong leader, right? Yeah. Like, Shingen dying means the Takeda go, have a big loss. Kenshin dying means the Uesugi lose most of their territory. It's just how it goes, right? Yeah, it's just how it goes. Okay. I think we'll leave it at this episode for today, with this sad note of the Uesugi going down. They're still there, but they're done, obviously, at this point. Okay, so the main conflict really at this point is, Oda versus Mori. Very interesting stuff. We watched a really good amount today. We advanced quite a bit. I think we're only halfway through still. I think there's 65 episodes or something. There's 64 or 5 episodes, which means we're only halfway through. I think I'll do another stream in 2 days. I really want to watch more. Yeah, tomorrow I'm doing another Japan prefecture stream. Sorry about the bird in the background. We're gonna learn about forget top of my head. What we're doing? Oh yeah, Aomori prefecture. And then I think Saturday I'll do another stream for the Sengoku Jidai. I did say real quick, I guess I will show you guys my save in Bannerlord Sokuro, so let's do that real quick. Maybe I'll do a quick battle. But yeah, learned so much stuff that I didn't know. I think obviously. Like this. Game capture. Here we go. It's capturing the game. Let's load. Real quick. So yeah, as I said, I started in Kyushu, built my character, companions, army a bit. And then I went to Oda Nobunaga and said, "Can I serve you, sir?" And he said yes. And then after I did it for a bit, I said, well, at first I was like mercenary, and then I said, "Yeah, can I be a retainer?" And he said, "Yes, you're pretty good, so you can be a retainer of the Oda clan." So yeah, as you can see, I'm here. Right now we're at war with the Tokugawa no Ryogoku, as well as... no, I think that's it right now. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Originally I started in Kyushu. Like I spent most of the early game in Kyushu there. Just going from city to city doing like side missions. But then yeah, I walked all the way from here, all the way here, all the way over here. I guess Kanonji is the big city here. And this is the, like what Dioda has for now. I think Nobunaga is besieging a castle here, I think? No, maybe someone else. So yeah, that's where we're at. And right now we are at war with the Tokugawa. Because this takes place later, that's what we're watching right now, I guess. Actually, we just became at war with them, and I'm going into their territory. I only have like 120 men. It's early game, so I only fight smaller armies. That's a caravan. Let's see if I can get into a battle real quick. Oh, I see an army. Oh, I see a bunch of armies, but they're small. I can win. And they're going into the castle. I could bait them out maybe. If I go away and come back, yeah, they're coming out, and then try to catch them in the field. Come on. Here we go. Except it's night, so we're not gonna see anything, so let me just wait for day to actually fight. Let me wait for day. But yeah, I really recommend this mode. Wait, I actually want them to go with the other army so they have bigger number. Here we go. Yeah, here we go. The two armies are combined. So now we're almost equal. Let's do it. Hopefully I don't lose the battle. Yield or fight. Yeah, 122 versus 117. That seems like good numbers. So it's not just a massacre. Ah, it's the forest map. There's no opening. I have... around here it's a bit more open, but... So, cavalry go all the way here. I only have like 17 infantry right now, which is not a lot. I'll put them right here. And then a line of gunners. I do have a few like Yumiya Shiteru, which are like bowmen, but it's mostly Teppo Ashigeru. You know, this type. But yeah, I do have a few archers as well. But my cavalry is kind of like the strongest thing right now. A lot of gunners and lancers. Okay, they're pretty far away, so I have time to get into position. I should tell them not to shoot, but I want them to load, because sometimes they don't load. And then, when I tell the other to fire, they load. It looks a bit more open over there. Nah, it's not a good spot, I don't like it. Let me try more in this line, with the infantry behind, and the cavalry ready to charge from here. I really need more like foot soldier because this is way too little. They have about 10 cavalry on the other side. Yeah, I mean it's open enough, I guess. Ah shit, hold fire, hold fire. They're not close enough. I mean actually do it. They're not advancing, so might as well shoot. Oh, they're advancing again. 150 meters. Seeing the banners. Limited shit. Let's see. For some reason, the pikemen are behind the archers. I mean, it seems perfect for the cavalry to destroy the archers. Damn, that guy fell off his horse. Actually, I kind of want to let the pikemen get closer, so you know what? Get the cavalry on this side. I kind of want to reposition my guys here. Like this. Reposition a little bit. We're doing good enough though. I just want to get the pikemen to charge into the fire, but that tree is kind of a pain. Can I reposition again? Like this. You guys behind. Maybe time to charge with the cavalry because those guys are coming. Oh yeah, they're coming. I don't want the cavalry too far to charge. Got someone. Okay, I think it's time for the charge. Attack them. I mean, maintain position. The pikemen attack as well. It's time. Nice. Yeah, perfect. I'll go after the horseman over there. Well, there's way too many of my own men to see. I mean, we're winning easy though. The strategy worked. There's really nothing like this game. Again, Total War, you only do strategy, right? Again, this one, you're in the thick of the battle. It's such a different feeling. That's why I love it, and I'm not really good or enjoy Total War as much. Well, I think it's running away over there. Oh! He got me pretty good. But they're done. Could reload. I still have 3 horsemen. What I need is a pistol, but I haven't found one yet. I think they're just running away at this point. Can I bait a tree? Yeah, I think it's just... I don't know if he's... No, it's not given up the battle. Ah, he killed someone. That's pretty good. Oh, I think he died himself. Okay, well, I think we're all done. Yeah, okay. Nice victory. Nice victory. Strategy is nice. I guess I could do a second battle. Capture you. Kato Noriaki. Sakai Yasuharu. Prisoners. Upgrade troops. But yeah, I got a mod where like in the base mod of Soko you only have like the Teppo Ashigaru, but I got a mod that adds the fire rocket Ashigaru, and they have like a bigger type of gun thing. Yeah, it's like almost a mortar, I guess, like a handheld mortar. Yeah. Oh, a lot of loot. Okay, maybe I can go after another army, but it's all small one here. They might run away from me. Oh, there's a big one here. 136. I mean, if I can lure it in battle, this would be like, I'm outnumbered, but I kind of want to do it. Yeah, there's a lot of them actually, like they have 200 over there. Go here. I'm kind of outnumbered, but I kind of want to do it. I mean, it's kind of running from me and it's going into the city. Buntalo. Wait, is this the same Buntalo as Shogun? No. Okay. I'm outnumbered, and I really don't have much infantry, but my cavalry is way too good. We can do it. Oh, open field too. That's great. With the rice field, which really slows down the enemy troop, I have an advantage here. Cavalry over here. You guys like this. You guys like this. Same strategy almost every time. I can't show you guys a siege because I'm still too early game. Are they advancing or are they retreating? They are advancing. Oh, they do have a lot of horsemen though. Got someone. I guess I could just get the cavalry to charge right away. Like this. I have so little infantry. Kill someone. I mean, my infantry is very little, but they're very hideable. Alright. I get a mod for this moment. It's pretty satisfying. I'm really gonna move because I'm gonna get shot otherwise. Yeah, they're already scattered. My horse is not really good at charging. I guess I can get the infantry to retreat. The cavalry to keep attacking. Oh, I got killed. RIP. I mean, knocked out. I didn't get killed. Got killed. Not really easy to hit first person. Yeah, I think I lost a lot of men, but it's a good victory. I should get everybody to charge. Damn, this guy is strong. I'm going down. They have very little left. And I'm down. No, we're done. We're more or less done. Very few horsemen left. I think I lost maybe a third of my men. Finished. So yeah, just wanted to showcase this mod, which again has been captivating me, so give it a try. Give it a try. And this is still a small scale battle. With a mod to have more bigger battle, eventually when you increase in the game you can have like a 2000 soldier battle, 1000 on your side and the other side. With a reinforcement system, and technically you can have like a 10,000 soldier battle, but I mean, in the map itself like this, you can have 2000 max. So like, if you fight someone with 3,000 soldiers, you know, and you kill the first 1,000, then they have more coming in. That's as much as the game can render at once. That's what I mean. Where's the... I feel like there's still an enemy else, man. I don't see him. What are we running after? I'm confused. Oh, I think we got it. Over there, yeah. He died. He died. Okay, so what are the casualties? I got 19 dead, 17 injured. They got 99 dead, 37 injured. Great victory. Great victory. Buntaro is a prisoner. I can't take all the prisoners because I can't hold that many. Okay, so just wanted to show real quick again this game that really captivates me. Anyway, that was a good stream. I hope you guys enjoyed the little bit of gameplay. And yeah, we'll do more reaction. As always, link for all the videos in the description. Like, subscribe, comment, and I'll see you guys next time. ExoticBankai. See you.